Good evening to everybody out there in late night in the Midlands land. My name is Ira Robinson, as opposed to being Michael Vera. Unfortunately tonight, Michael Vera is sick and he is unable to do the show very, very well. So he asked if I could step in for him and do the show for him, and I'm most pleased to do so. Please pardon any mistakes that happen or any kind of weird things that occur, as this would be my first time running the show alone and all of that kind of good stuff. But we will do things as good as we can do. Tonight's guest is Bob Mitchell, and we are going to be talking about alien encounters, and lots of great information is going to come out of tonight's show. I think that you guys are going to get a big kick out of it, and lots of education out of it as well. So, before we begin with the guest, we have some news for you on tap for you. The first bit of news that I ran across for you guys has to do with genetics. And this is a topic that I have a deep fascination with myself. And I think that it's something that is important to understand, because science is making a lot of leaps forward, I guess you could say, to change the human genome as much as they can. For what purpose? Who knows? Some things may be very dark associated with it. But in this case, I guess there's sort of good things with it. Let's see what you guys think. So the first baby has now been born without any inherited diseases. A pioneering IVF treatment has made it possible to prevent diseases being passed from parent to child. Lucas Miagu had been at great risk of inheriting Charcot-Marie tooth disease from his mother, Carmen, who had in turn inherited it from her father. The unpleasant condition, which can cause crippling muscle weaknesses, currently has no known cure. Despite the risk, however, Lucas was born fit and healthy, with no sign of the condition, thanks to a remarkable new technique capable of isolating embryos that are free of genetic disease. The groundbreaking method could soon offer hope to thousands of couples in a similar situation who are concerned about passing a genetic disorder on to their children. It works by taking DNA samples from both the couple and their closest relatives and comparing the gene sequences to identify what parts of the genetic codes are defective. The embryos to be used in the IVF treatment are then biopsied to determine which are free of the disease. So again, this is on the surface of things a good thing, or at least so you would think. And yes, in this case, I would say there's a definite positive to it. But of course, any new kind of scientific treatments that come out, any kind of new medical breakthroughs that come out, they always say, okay, well, this is for the benefit of mankind. This is for a positive thing. We're trying to make people more healthy and that sort of thing. And that's a good, right? But then on the other side of the coin, you always have those dark forces that are sitting in the background saying, I wonder how we can use this more effectively. Let's see how we can train up new super soldiers that are completely free of all genetic defects. And let's see what we can do to tweak this one over here and this little gene over here. Are they going to be stronger? Are they going to be able to see in the dark? Are they going to glow in the dark? I mean, we have glow in the dark cats, right? And that's supposedly a good thing, a benefit for mankind. So yeah, I mean, genetic manipulation, I have the stance basically that I understand the point of genetic manipulation. I understand why they do it. And if they're doing it for a positive thing, yes, I can see where the benefits would be. I personally don't think that we should be messing around with the human genome in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we're here. We've been here for hundreds of thousands of years or more, depending on what your viewpoints of the world is. And we've been okay. There's nothing untowards about it. But now that we're starting to basically screw around with the human genome, what are we going to do to ourselves basically down the line? We don't know what kind of impact something like this, for instance, is going to have on the next generation of children that this person could have. What if they're basically they get together with somebody later down the line and they give birth to another child, and now you have a mix of somebody that's got the perfect genetic disease-free DNA combining with somebody that has genetic diseases in their DNA. What are the results going to be? I could see some very large potential issues happening with it all. So the next story that I ran across is about something that I've talked about on my show, Open Eyes, a few times, the idea that things in our past are not what we have been told. A vast underground city has now been discovered in Turkey. A subterranean complex covering an area of 5 million square feet has been unearthed in Nevşehir. Now that is huge. 5 million square feet of underground city is absolutely enormous. Dating back 5,000 years, the elaborate underground city was discovered entirely by accident by workers who had been shifting piles of soil around as part of an urban renewal project. The vast labyrinth, which had been engineered with its own air shafts and water channels, contained everything needed to sustain a sizable population and most likely acted as a place where people could have waited out in safety during times of conflict. A quote from the head of Turkey's Housing Development Administration, it's not a known underground city. Tunnel passages of 7 kilometers are being discussed and being discovered here. I mean, 7 kilometers worth of tunnel passages. My goodness. Geophysicists from Nevşehir University estimated that the tunnels sunk as far as 370 feet into the ground, but admitted that it's still very difficult to determine just how large the complex really is. So on the surface of things, they know that it's at least 5 million square feet, and it could be even larger. They have not discovered the end of it yet. So this is 5,000 years old. This is an underground city at the least 5,000 years old that is just absolutely ginormous. I mean, that's a vast amount of space, people. So with this information, this also is not the first one that has been discovered, by the way, especially in Turkey. I think that there's actually been 2 or 3 others that have been discovered. This would be the largest one. But in a lot of these complexes that are down there, you see, I mean, everything. They have school rooms. They have growing facilities. They have everything, whatever the case may be, armories and so on and so forth. And we know that at least some of them that have been discovered were used basically as a way to ride out storms, for instance, like the gigantic storms that can sometimes happen in that area. Also, they would ride out when barbarians are at the gate, essentially. So other cultures or other people coming in to take their stuff or to destroy them, go to war with them, instead of fighting them, they would actually go down into these vast cities underground as a means of protection and just wait out whatever it may be that was coming along. So that's a pretty amazing thing. And this is an extraordinary feat of human ingenuity and human engineering. And this was 5,000 years ago. So I guess the thing that I take away from a story that's like this and others that are like it is that we as human beings have sort of been lied to all along. Especially in this day and age, we think that we are the height and breadth of the technology, that we are the end all and be all of technological advancement, so to speak. And we think that our ancestors, the people that have come before, were nothing but little primitive savages that were nothing more than hunter-gatherers and could do no feats of engineering or anything along those lines. And we see things like this then, and we have to realize, we have to come to terms with the idea that we are not being told everything that has been going on. So, a story like this, like I said, it kind of puts into perspective, I guess you could say, the things that have occurred in human history. And it really does go to show how amazing our ancestors really were. We have right now all of the conveniences that we could ever ask for. We have electricity. We have our iPads and iPods and computer systems and all of that kind of stuff. And we think, hey, we've got it all. We're great. We're wonderful. We have all this relaxation and all of this kind of stuff. And I guess the issue that is with that is that it does make a society kind of lazy, right? We can't really come to terms with the idea that those in the past had so much more capability of constructing all of this kind of stuff or developing all of this kind of stuff. And I guess, like I said, the takeaway from it for me is just that it really does show how amazing the people that came before really were, and how much actually with our technology and with our idealisms that we have today, how much of that innovation has been lost in today's people and in today's society. It's kind of sad when you think about it. So, of course, one of the big things that is on everybody's mind of late is the Germanwings crash that happened in the French Alps. And some information has been coming out about the fact that the co-pilot was the one who crashed the plane. They're questioning whether or not this was something that was intentional or whether it was an accident or whatever, but they're starting to basically come out and admit that it was probably intentional. I don't think that they're going so far as to say that he was trying to be a quote-unquote terrorist with it all, but they are at least admitting that the guy had problems with depression and so on and so forth. So this article that I ran across, I wanted to speak to you guys with it and get your thoughts on it. Co-pilot Andreas Lubitz was in therapy for suicidal tendencies. Andreas Lubitz, the co-pilot who deliberately crashed a Germanwings flight into the French Alps, had been treated for suicidal tendencies, it has emerged. German prosecutors investigating the case said Lubitz's medical files showed that he underwent a prolonged course of treatment for serious psychological problems before obtaining his pilot's license. The files also showed that he had visited mental health specialists more recently who had issued him with sick notes. Now, some of the information that I've seen come out as well also have alluded to the idea that he actually was on SSRIs, and I cannot remember the words that stands for. It's serotonin something. Anyway, so but basically with the SSRIs, with these drugs, these medications, one of the side effects of them is to have suicidal thoughts, is to have suicidal tendencies. So somebody that's on depression, let's say, is going to their psychologist or their psychiatrist to get help, and they put them on these medications and say, okay, well, this is going to help you out, but by the way, you might feel like you want to kill yourself. Well, how the hell is that helping me out? You know, that's no help at all. I'd rather take a nail in my foot maybe as a help. I'd feel a little bit differently about things anyways. So, you know, that's just the thought that you see all these different drugs that are out that have all these horrific side effects. I mean, you know, you want to lose weight, so you eat potato chips that have Olestra in it, but by the way, you might bleed from your butt while you're losing the weight. You know, I mean, it's insanity, guys. It really is. And then you have to go and you have to get on all of the medications to counteract the side effects that are going on with it all. And you know, you have to really recognize and really realize that 99% of what goes on with all of this stuff is a complete sham and scam. Not long ago, the CDC released information saying that the flu vaccine that was released this year for this year's flu was 18% successful, had an 18% success rate, and a 15% success rate in those who are most vulnerable to the flu, which would be the children, you know, children under 2 and that sort of thing. And okay, so you have to think, okay, an 18% success rate, that is not a success rate at all. If my kids who are in school got 18% on their test, that would be a failure of epic proportions. They would have to redo this test that they took. So where do they kind of get off saying, well, we had an 18% success rate? And even though there is a large margin that has not been effective, you know, with this, there's what, 82% worth of ineffectiveness. Even though that is there, everybody should still get their flu shots because you might fall into that 18%, and 18% is better than 0%. Well, at what point do we look at the things and say it was a matter of the people's immune system kicked in and took care of the flu, as opposed to it being the vaccine that actually prevented them from getting the flu? And the same kind of goes with this whole Germanwings crash deal with this co-pilot. If the guy was suicidal tendencies and they put them on these SSRIs, then that is just going to exacerbate the situation. And my hope is that with a crash like this, with a circumstance like this, the positive, I guess, that could come out of it would be that people could start realizing that there really are problems with these medications and that they really need to kind of be rethought. That's my hope. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting as well when it comes to this whole Germanwings crash deal is that in 1953, there was another plane crash that occurred. 44 people were killed. And it happened in the exact same spot as this crash did. So it's kind of an interesting little sideline correlation. I kind of toss that information out to let people know about this because not really many people have discovered this fact. It's kind of an interesting little sideline, I guess you could say. So the next story that I have for you guys is antibiotic-resistant bacteria from American cattle become airborne, but is it life-threatening? The story goes, airborne particulate matter wafting off of American cattle yards contains antibiotics, bacteria, and antibiotic-resistant DNA, a new study has found out. Environmental tests on the spread of antibiotics have been performed in the past, but this is the first time the researchers have examined aerial dispersion. The work suggests that airborne transmission may be contributing to an emerging global health problem, where doctors find it increasingly difficult to treat life-threatening infections. What we have here basically is the idea that, again, kind of getting into the over-medication or the drugs thing, the idea that everything has to be hit with the antibiotics and the antiviral medications. No matter what it is, your immune system is not functional, at least according to most medical doctors that are out there. Your immune system, even though, again, we've been here for hundreds of thousands to millions of years, functioning just fine as human beings, only now our immune systems are non-functional and need to have all of the medical support that they can be given. And that may actually be true because, we have at the same time a lot of people that are raised up by in the environment of not letting their kids go out and play. They don't get to go out and play in the dirt. They don't get to go out and play with worms. They don't get to go out and play with bugs. They don't get to go out and be exposed to the world and exposed to all of the bugs and the ooky stuff that's out there. And then when they do come inside, if they do go out, when they do come inside, the first thing that the parents do is hit them with all of the antibiotic hand cleansers and sanitizers and all of this kind of stuff, and go take a shower and wash yourself off and get yourself clean. And, you can't be dirty in any way, shape, or form because that's going to make you sick. Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Your immune system has to let you get sick. Your body has to go through that sickness in order for your immune system to learn how to combat it. And once it's learned how to combat something, it can then combat everything else that comes along that is of a similar type. That includes all of the flus and all of the everything. No matter what it is, your immune system is kind of the end all and be all when it comes to the defense of your body. So I guess my point with all of this is that parents need to really let their kids be kids. Let your kids go outside and play. Let your kids go outside and get dirty and stay dirty for a little while. Think about it this way. A lot of doctors even have come out and said that taking showers too much is bad for you, and it's bad for your hair, and it's bad for your skin, and it's bad for your body. There's reasons for that. It's because we were evolved, if you want to go with evolution, but at the very least, the adaptation thing, at the very least, we have adapted to function while being dirty. Our ancestors in the past didn't wash themselves every day. They didn't go through all of the hand sanitation and all of that kind of stuff. They'd go poop, they'd wipe their butts with their hand, and they'd go out and shake hands with other people. And so our bodies were exposed to all of these different things for so many generations, thousands of generations. And so we now in this modern day and age, now we think to ourselves, well, we're different. And we are different, but we're different because of bad reasons. So guys, listen, I'm going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we are going to bring on Bob Mitchell. Bob Mitchell is a Canadian author and journalist who covered crime and sports for the Toronto Star for more than 35 years. He's also a field investigator for MUFON based in Ontario and an executive with MUFON in Canada. Mitchell continues to be a freelance journalist and consultant. He is currently writing a children's book and shopping a horror thriller screenplay. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. I have listened to Bob Mitchell quite a few times on other shows, and I love the guy. I love what he has to say. I'm going to have a good time talking to him, and I think you guys are going to have a good time listening to him. So stick around with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Ben Franklin said, "If you do the same thing tomorrow as you did today, you're going to get the same tomorrow as you got today." Changing the world starts with you, and changing you starts with changing the way you think. Late Night in the Midlands can help. Listen to all of our shows at latenightinthemidlands.com, because things really do need to change. TROLLS. This is a terrible new disorder being diagnosed every day. Victims of this disease have been found in psychologists, scientists, doctors, other people with letters and numbers behind their names, and anyone else who is in the world specifically to cause trouble. It stands for Totalitarian Regime Orchestrating Laughable Liar Syndrome, and is a terrible burden on anyone around those that have been diagnosed with this disease. Symptoms may include debunking all truths, diversion tactics, divisive talk and flame war baiting, COINTELPRO tactics and maneuvers, and making rude and obnoxious comments even where such things are not warranted. You can help cure the problem by opening your eyes to the facts, speaking about this disorder to anyone you know, and not allowing their disease to influence your life. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with trolls, please seek immediate assistance by going to latenightinthemidlands.com and listening to all of the shows that are available. Only you can prevent trolls. This message brought to you by IRA, the Independently Reporting Association. Thank you for your support.
The L&M Radio Network and Late Night in the Midlands depends on you, the listener. Without you, there would be no us. So help us continue to bring you the best guests with the best information, and subscribe today. Information on becoming an L&M subscriber can be found at the top of latenightinthemidlands.com. Just click the About Subscriptions tab and become part of the family while helping the truth stay alive. And while you're at it, maybe subscriptions aren't for you. A one-time donation helps as well. Click that donate button on the right side of latenightinthemidlands.com and help us help you.
At The Secret Teachings, we are not a part of any group, label, and we do not attempt to fearmonger. Some of the topics we discuss may seem scary, so I advise you not to be afraid, but to be informed as we discuss current events and ancient history, astrotheology and symbolism, the paranormal and the occult, the esoteric, health, and much more. I am not here to tell you that what I say is truth, but to allow you to decide for yourself based on the evidence presented and the dots connected. Information is not negative. It is how you view it that determines the dimensional characteristics of either dual aspect of negativity or positivity. Try as you might, but no amount of disinformation, propaganda, rhetoric, or trolling will change the truth. The truth is the truth, regardless if the masses accept it as is, or if it is accepted by only 1 out of billions. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. For more information on airtimes and free downloads of past episodes of The Secret Teachings, you can visit www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands. Thank you so much for sticking around through that break. I really appreciate it. By the way, we are fully listener-supported, 100% listener-supported. We would really appreciate here at Late Night in the Midlands if you guys would take the time, take the opportunity, and take the step to come to latenightinthemidlands.com and click on the subscribe button or the donate button. When you become a subscriber, you support us on a monthly basis. It is a very low cost, and it is something that helps to ensure that we can keep bringing you the best in information and the best shows that we possibly can do. This network has a lot of things that are available to listen to. You know, on a daily basis, there are at least 5 hours worth of things. And very soon we're going to be expanding to a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week format. That takes a little bit of money to run. So we would really appreciate any subscribers coming on to, come to latenightinthemidlands.com. Hit that subscribe button. And if you don't want to subscribe, hit the donate button and at least give a little bit. And that way we can keep doing this every month. It would really be appreciated. So guys, we have tonight the guest, Bob Mitchell. I gave you the bio before the break there, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with him. We will take calls tonight. The call-in number is different than the normal call-in number, of course, because I'm not there at Michael's house. So, but tonight's call-in number is going to be 260-494-3937. That's 260-494-3937. I will take calls, but I will hold off on calls, please, until after the next break, basically, and then we'll go ahead and take calls for our guest, Bob Mitchell. So let's go ahead and see if we can get him on. Hold on for just a moment. Here we go.
Hello.
Hello there. Is this Bob Mitchell?
Yes, it is.
Hello there. My name is Ira Robinson, and I am from the Late Night in the Midlands Network. Michael called in, Michael was sick tonight, so he asked if I could take over the show for him tonight and be on here with you. So,
no problem, sir. What was your name again?
My name is Ira.
Ira. Okay,
yeah.
Good.
There we go. We are currently live. I did read the biography of you to the listeners, so they have an idea of who you are and what you're about. But if you wouldn't mind going on ahead and giving out as much information as you want to give, I would definitely appreciate it.
Sure. Just ask me any question, and I'll. Am I live now?
You are live right now. Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Well, yeah. I've. Let's see. Where can I begin? I worked for the Toronto Star, which is Canada's largest newspaper, for over 35 years until May of 2013, when I decided to take a buyout, along with quite a lot of my colleagues at the time. One of the reasons was that I had moved outside of the city, probably about 60 to 70 miles away. And at the time when I moved, I was still covering crime for the Toronto Star, and I was based out of a place called Brampton, Ontario, and they had a courthouse there, which was one of the busiest courthouses in all of Ontario. And I covered a lot of the murder cases, but from my house in Brantford, it was only about an hour's drive, so that wasn't bad. And went on vacation, and 2 weeks after we moved, I suddenly got a phone call saying I was being transferred back down to our number 1 Yonge Street, which is the main headquarters of the Toronto Star, which is right in the heart of downtown Toronto. And instead of doing crime, I was going to go back to sports, which I actually started my career in, and wound up covering the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NHL and the Toronto Argos of the CFL. And it really took a toll on me because the commute was about 5 hours a day, going from the car to the GO train and back and forth. So couldn't take that anymore after a couple of years. And
yeah, I'd be the same way.
decided I had to leave that and try to reinvent myself as a freelancer and get to work on some books I wanted to write. And so that's what happened. And then the UFO thing came around quite by accident. I had some interest in UFOs. My wife and I had a sort of a encounter about 10 years ago that I'll talk about in a minute if I can. But let's see, I one of the freelance articles I wanted to do for one of the local papers out here was to find somebody that was investigating UFOs. So I called up MUFON and asked to see if I could speak to somebody in Ontario, and lo and behold, there wasn't many people doing it in Ontario. In fact, there's only really one person doing it, and he was nowhere near where I lived. And so I met him, and one thing led to another, and I became an investigator just like he was, and that led me to contacting a few people that I became very interested in, and wound up writing 2 books in the last 3 months.
Wow, very cool. So your background in investigation with the Toronto Star has really helped you out with this whole thing as well, with the
I think so. I mean, I did a lot of crime work and police work, and so I seem to be able to ask questions, and I mean, I wasn't shy talking to people, and I quite enjoyed it. So it seemed to work out. The strange thing about it is at that first meeting we had in Brantford, Stu Bundy, who's the Ontario director, he used to be a sports broadcaster for the CTV television network up here, and I had met him many, many years ago when I was in sports, and it was quite strange when I wound up having lunch with him and realized it was the same Stu Bundy. But we decided we were going to see if we could expand MUFON a bit in other areas of Ontario, so we thought, why not give it a shot in Brantford, and we expected 15 people to show up at our first meeting, and lo and behold, we ended up with almost 80 people. They were lined up outside the door at this local coffee shop, and it was during that meeting that I got up, and with little experience that I had in investigation at that time, I started talking about the different races of aliens that I had researched about that were supposedly living on Earth, and I happened to mention that one of the ways they entered your houses was through the walls or through the windows. And when I said that, I looked out in the audience, and there was this one man who just seemed to be completely apoplectic. He was almost having a fit. His arms were waving. I could see he was saying, that happened to me, and he was really having almost I wouldn't say a heart attack, but he was very emotional. And afterwards, he came up to me, and he said, I have a story to tell you. And before I left that night, I had 2 or 3 people sought me out, and they all had stories to tell me about their experiences, and they wanted somebody to talk to. And so over the next few months, I arranged to talk to these people, and lo and behold, I got 2 books out of it.
How surprised were you to see that many people ended up showing up at that meeting?
I was shocked, because I had no idea that the interest would have been that overwhelming. I mean, there was a story that was in the local paper that I talked about. We were having this meeting, and it was the summertime. It was in August, and it was I think in the middle of the week, and I figured a few people would show up, and I mean, I was hoping a few people would show up. I had no idea, but then one by one they kept coming in the door, and every one of them had either seen something they couldn't explain. They all had pictures they wanted to show me, but they all had stories. And 3 of the 4 people that are in my latest book, Intrusion, Alien Encounters, they basically waited till it was all over and sought me out and sat me down on a chair that was outside the coffee shop, and basically, I wouldn't say pleaded with me, but they wanted me to make some time so that I could hear their story, and they wanted to assure that they're not crazy, that they wanted me to believe that it was really happening to them, and they just wanted somebody to talk to. And I still didn't know what I was getting into. I had no idea what they were going to tell me. All I knew is that I've always wanted to write a UFO book, but I didn't want to just write a book about people seeing lights in the sky. I wanted to write a book about what they had experienced and see if it was true or not, see if I could tell if they were just making it up or they really had these experiences.
So with your background, like in the investigation into the crime stuff, how kind of, I guess you could say, adept have you been at being able to tell if somebody is trying to hand you a line, kind of trying to lie to you about their encounter, just trying to tell a story, or if they really are telling you something that they understand as being true?
Well, every one of them was very emotional when they were talking to me. They were even though they were just telling me the story, what they remembered, they were reliving it, and they kept, they repeated over and over again. Now, you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is really what happened, and they didn't seem to be making it up. They went over the story several times, and I asked them, several different ways about things, and it was always the same. They never seemed to embellish anything. It was very from the heart, every one of them. And two of them, we actually ended up getting a hypnotist to go and regress them a little bit. And not only did they repeat the stories that they had told me over a series of interviews they did with them, but they actually added things that they remembered from the encounters. So I never did get the feeling of any of the ones I talked to that they were making anything up. They actually believed they experienced what they told me.
Definitely understandable. I know when I talk to people about experiences that they've had, a lot of times you can get the feel that they have definitely gone through it because they are just so filled with this abject wonder a lot of times. And sometimes, sometimes it's like just astonishment, like they're looking back in their memories and thinking, wow, did I really experience that? Well, here, I'll tell you, and maybe I can kind of get this cathartic release, I guess, by telling the story.
Yeah, and the other thing was that none of these people had ever met anybody, each of them, before. Three of them were at that meeting, but they didn't know each other, and they had no knowledge of the other stories. And I did interview them all separately over several weeks and even a month in some cases. And there were a lot of similarities in their stories. So they didn't collaborate with each other and try to get their story straight. It was, some of the similarities came out, and it was kind of astonishing.
Definitely understand that. So you have written 2 books, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the first book is, let me see here, Incident at Pleasant Ridge, a Canadian UFO mystery.
Yeah.
And then the other one is... I'm sorry, go ahead.
You want to know a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. Would love to know about it.
Okay, well, at that first meeting, one of the things that everybody who I had talked to there said, do you know about this flying saucer that landed in Joe Bordas Field? And I had no idea what they were talking about. And it wasn't just one person. It was almost, I would say, the majority of the 70 people that were at that meeting knew about this event. And this was an event that happened on July 6, 1975, so it was quite a long time ago. And they said, oh, yeah, this flying saucer landed in this fellow's field, and, people thought he was crazy, but he swore it happened, and everybody talked about it at the time. So I thought, well, this might be a good story to start out with, because the in-depth story that I wanted to do on people's encounters, that was going to take some time, so I had to start somewhere. So I went home, and in the next few days I started doing some research, and I couldn't find a lot on this. By then, Project Blue Book had been closed, so there wasn't anything in those files, and everything I Googled basically had the same 2 or 3 paragraphs about what happened. So, there wasn't much of a book in that. But I thought there had to be more people that knew about it. And the more I tried to research it, the more I found out that almost everybody connected with this case was now dead. So that posed another problem, that there wasn't many people I could actually interview that was alive at the time. So I started doing some newspaper researches back in 1975, and was able to piece together a basic story of what happened. And basically what happened was that afternoon, Joe Border, who was a tobacco farmer in a town called Mount Pleasant, which is a farming community just immediately south of Brantford. And so you're looking at, again, 70 miles southwest of Toronto. He's out, just sort of leaning on the fence, looking over his field, and he sees a bright object out there. He says it's a shiny metallic dome. And as he's looking at it, a strange thought comes into his mind. The thought is basically, there's nothing there, don't worry about it, just go about your business. And for some reason he does. He goes about his business, and he doesn't think anything of it again. And the next day goes by, and he's not even thinking about it. And it wasn't until 2 days later that he's out in the field, and all of a sudden he comes across, which I guess today we would call it a crop circle, but it really wasn't round. It was more like just an area that had been completely burnt to the ground, and the tobacco leaves were sort of bent over but not crushed. And he couldn't figure out what it was. He thought, would somebody vandalize this place? And everything outside of this about a 24-foot diameter was still fine, except in this one spot. All these, bent over, burnt tobacco leaves, and there was a purplish liquid substance that was around the leaves too. And suddenly he thought to himself, was that a flying saucer that I seen? Because in his mind he thought, there had to be something there. And before that happened, after he thought about it being a flying saucer, the thought in his mind was that, no, it's just a tanker truck spraying the crops. But that day, when he found the burnt area, he realized that he didn't have a tanker truck in that area spraying crops that day, and there was none scheduled. So he was very perplexed, and he didn't know what to do. And he called his brother at the time. His brother happened to be the Crown Attorney, which in America would be the equivalent of the state DA for Brantford, and a very reputable guy. And he called him, and he said, what should I do? This is on my property. I mean, you got to come out here and take a look at this, and what would you do? And he said, well, I'd call the police. So he thought about it, but he didn't call anybody. He didn't report it to anybody. And yet, that afternoon, all of a sudden, official-looking people started showing up at his property. One of the strangest things was that a black limo with Arizona license plates with official-looking people in it just drove onto the property and were at the site. And I mean, it's one thing enough to see a strange black limo showing up at your property, but why Arizona license plates?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're not going to drive from Arizona in a few hours. And even if they flew from Arizona a few hours, you're not going to rent a car up here with Arizona license plates. Yes. So he couldn't figure out what that was all about. And he went to go out to the field, and lo and behold, the exact same thing happened in his mind. The thought entered his mind is, there's nothing to see here. Don't worry. Go back and do your chores. There's nothing for you to look at. And again, for some reason, he knows he should be going out looking at this, but he's turned around and goes back into the house and doesn't bother with them. And remember, he still hasn't told anybody about this. And eventually his brother comes out later that day, and he sees the thing. And his brother takes some samples of the purplish liquid that he sees on the ground, and he decides, well, I'm going to take this down to the forensic science lab in Toronto personally and see what it is, because I don't know what it is, and he's believing his brother. His brother, is not one to be crazy or anything. And so the OPP, which is the Ontario Provincial Police, they come out and they do an investigation, and they take their own samples. And again, he still hasn't told any newspaper about this. And the day he tells a newspaper about it, suddenly 3 investigators, 2 from the Buffalo area and 1 from Ontario, that they claim to be part of a UFO network that are out there investigating, phone him and ask to come out and see the property. And he says, yeah, come on out. So they show up. Again, there hasn't been any story in the paper, but he doesn't question them how they knew about it. I question about how they knew about it now, because it wasn't possible for them to know about it yet. They come out there, they're looking around the place, and the story that is told is that while they're out there looking at it, they suddenly hear what to them is a female electronic voice that somehow is coming from somewhere in the woods. And it's basically repeating everything they're saying, but in an electronic voice a few seconds after they're saying it. Whatever it was, they get spooked. They go back home, and they end up talking to Joe Board and his wife for a couple of hours, and then they take off. And the next day, Joe calls the newspapers, and the story appears the following day in the papers. But it hadn't appeared anywhere before yet he had these strange people show up, and the Arizona license plates show up. What makes the story even stranger is that a few days later, his brother calls the forensic science lab in Toronto and asks them, well, what did you find in the samples? And the person who runs the place says, I don't know what you're talking about. We have no samples. There's nothing on file. So those samples disappeared. And to this day, they've never resurfaced anywhere. There was a famous ufologist up here, McKay, I can't remember his first name now, Thomas McKay. 10 years he investigated this, and he tried to get freedom of information from the Canadian government, and it went all the way to the Prime Minister's office, and they told him it was a crime scene at one point and said that they couldn't release any information. But he never did ever get any information on it.
So I wonder how much of this is kind of...
So I don't know what happened that day.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it was kind of like related maybe to... I guess they knew that it was coming down, so they had everything kind of pre-planned and laid into place and ready to go.
I don't know, but the strangest thing is that when I was researching the book and when I heard about the book, trying to do the book, one of the people that was at the meetings was a farmer that lived on the adjacent farm at the time. And he says to me that he's seen the flying saucer come over his house, land in Joe Borda's field, went to take a look at it, and lo and behold, the thought goes into his mind, there's nothing there, don't worry about it, go home and mind your own business. And he does that, and a couple of days later, he's out in his field, and he sees the identical same patch of burnt tobacco. But his father says, don't tell anybody, because everybody in town is thinking your neighbor's a crazy guy, so we don't want anybody coming to our property and snooping around here. So they never report to anybody, and so as far as anybody's concerned, only Joe Borda's the only guy that ever saw anything, but this neighbor he swears he saw it. And in fact, a few days later, he says he went to take a closer look at the site, and there was all these people in hazmat suits with Geiger counters. And another limo pulled up. This time it wasn't an Arizona limo, but it was an official, and a guy got out and introduced himself as being an Air Force colonel with Project Blue Book. Of course, Project Blue Book had been closed for 6 years at that time. So, but he didn't know that at the time. So I don't know what was going on, but there was something mysterious about that event, and even till today, there's just nothing on any site. I've gone through all the national archives. I put in requests. I've gone through the Canadian Air Force, the Army, the military, and I get the same question back. They have no information about a Joe Borda or that farm.
Huh.
But something happened. I just don't know what it is.
That is a really cool story. There's a lot of different elements to it that I guess you could say kind of fascinate me. I had an encounter with a UFO at one point in time, and just kind of nutshell it a little bit here. I've actually had a couple of them over the years, but this one in particular kind of fits in a little bit. There was like a physical craft. It was actually the night before I was going to get married to my second wife, and I was driving down the highway, and there were a bunch of cars that were pulled over to the side of the road, and I'm thinking, okay, well, something happened. Maybe there was an accident or something. So I stopped my car to see if there was anybody that needed any help. I got out of the car and I saw that there were a bunch of people that were kind of lined up along the side of the road. There was, I think there was about 12 or so. And I kind of walked up to them, and they were all staring off into one direction. So I looked over in that direction, and I saw a craft that was hovering in the air. It was above a house, and this craft, it was one of the disc-shaped kind of craft, basically. But this craft was hovering there, and it hovered there for quite a bit of time. I can't say exactly how much time passed, but it felt like a while, you know? And nobody said anything. It was complete silence. We were all just dead silent staring at this thing. And then suddenly it kind of almost like it popped out of existence, but you could tell that it kind of went straight up into the air, basically. But it went so fast, it was like just poof, gone, you know? And as soon as that happened, we all just got back into the cars and started driving away, and never thought to ask anything of anybody. It was like our minds were just completely blanked at that point.
I mean, even the people that I talked to in the other book, in True Alien Encounters, one of the similarities is that whatever it is, they completely control your mind during any of the encounters, to the point where you don't think of asking questions. You in your mind, you want to ask these questions, but your entire mind is sort of taken over by what you're looking at or what you're experiencing, that you don't have any control over anything.
Yeah, it's almost like you're short-circuited, basically, in the brain.
Yeah. You see it, you feel it, but you can't do anything about it. And so what happened to you is, quite not unusual, I don't think. It's probably the norm. You mentioned about encounter. I mentioned at the beginning that my wife and I had an encounter. At least I can't explain it, so I don't know what it was. But about 10 years ago, we were living in a bungalow in Oakville, Ontario, which is a town just immediately west of Toronto. And it was the springtime, and my wife had worked the late shift at a assisted living center, and so she got home quite late. I think it was after midnight, and was watching some TV, and I went to bed, and I'm a pretty light sleeper. Things wake me up at a drop of a pin, so unless I take a sleeping pill, I rarely ever dream or anything. But that night, for some reason, I was sound asleep, and you couldn't wake me up with anything. But just around midnight, my wife started hearing this almost like a rolling thunder, a humming, something like a train coming through. And she looked out the front window, and up in the sky, it looked as if the dark clouds of it was after midnight. The dark sky a hole had been punched right through the dark sky with this white cloud-like substance going right through it. And everything in the front part of the house, the garbage cans, everything was all whirling around like you were in a mini tornado, and things were blowing everywhere. So she came and got me up, and I have no recollection of her. Well, I guess I have a recollection of her getting me out of bed and coming out, but she says I then looked out the front window at the clouds. Now, I have no recollection of doing that, but at some point, I could hear the same was happening in the backyard, and I remember clearly that all the patio furniture is now rolling around again like a tornado, is throwing it everywhere, the gate slamming open. But the strangest thing is, instead of being pitch black, it's as if it's bright sunlight is shining down on me. And I don't think to look up, even though it's so bright, but at no time do I ever look up to see what's making the light. And I remember gathering everything and trying to put everything back the way it is, and I did. And then I came back in, and my wife says we sat down and talked about it for a little bit. And then I went back to bed. She tells me the next morning, first, she also tells me that night that when she came back into the backyard to see if I had needed any help doing all the, getting all the patio furniture back, she says, I'm engulfed in a bluish-white light. Now, again, I have no recollection of being engulfed in a bluish-white light. But I come in, and I go to bed as if nothing's happened. And I wake up the next morning, and the first thought that's in my mind is, was that a dream last night, or did something happen? And I remember clearly asking her, did I go outside, and was there like a tornado outside? And she says, yeah, you wouldn't believe what was going on. So as far as I know, there was no time loss or anything. I don't know what it was, but it was a very strange occurrence, and I can't explain what it was because none of the neighbors experienced anything like it. They weren't out there, and they didn't hear anything during the night. So strange as it is, I don't know what that was.
Well, one question that I would have that I guess kind of relates, this actually is kind of a, I don't know, you could say an encounter or something like that my wife Jolene and I had. We were, and I'm kind of wanting to get your thoughts on this to see if this would relate to all of the things that you have investigated. We were sitting watching a TV show before she had to go to work. And we do this in the morning time. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, basically. And we're watching a TV show that lasted for a half hour, 30 minutes. We started watching it and never took a break, never walked away from it, never stopped the show or anything like that. We started it basically right at 3 o'clock. By the time that the show ended, it was after 4 o'clock. Now, how did this thing, how did we watch a show that was 30 minutes long for over an hour long? Do you hear anything like that as well?
That happens to a lot of people. I've had several people tell me they've been watching television shows and they look at the clock and it doesn't make sense. Something happened that, and what it is, I can't tell you. But if you're certain that only 30 minutes should have gone by and an hour went by, then there's a loss of time there.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it's just kind of one of those weird things. We just didn't know maybe if there was something that happened to us that, maybe an abduction kind of thing ended up occurring and we were kind of replaced with time, or something.
It doesn't necessarily have to be an abduction because sometimes the experiences happen right where you are. You're not taken away. You're just look at you and examine you at where you are. And somehow time stands still for you, but it moves for other people.
It's a very weird experience either way.
That could have been one of the things that happened to you, because I've had several people have similar stories to that. They've been watching TV and 2 and 3 hours go by, and they have no memory of anything.
That's very cool. It's a weird experience when it happens to you, because you look back on your memory and you're like, okay, I did not get that at all,
Yeah. Well, it's like I'm sure we've all had the experience where you're driving, and especially when you're alone in the car and you're driving, and next thing you know, you're somewhere where you can't remember, well, how did I get here?
Right, that's the autopilot thing. Yeah, your consciousness goes on to autopilot, basically.
Yeah, now the hypnosis guy that I use, Les Such, local guy in Brantford, he says that is almost like hypnotic self-hypnosis, that it happens all the time when people are driving. You're still safe because you're I don't know how you said, not the conscious part of you, the unconscious part of you is still looking at the road, but the conscious part of you isn't. It's somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. It's that hypnagogic state, that state that's between sleepfulness and wakefulness.
Who knows? You might have the same thing when you're watching TV.
That very well could be.
For both of you to have it, that's kind of strange.
So you've written a second book. This one is called Intrusion, Alien Encounters, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that book and what was involved in writing that one.
Well, it involves 4 people, 3 of whom live within an hour of the Brantford area, and another person who lives up in Lake Simcoe part of Ontario, which is about 2 hours north of Toronto. And they're all from different walks of life. They're all different people. Two of them used their real name. Two of them decided at the last moment that they had relatives who weren't too thrilled about them doing the book, and for their sake, they asked me to change it to a pseudonym. But they really, struggled over that because they had nothing to hide. They other than the fact that they had some relatives that were concerned about it. But I was okay with that because I know that not everybody is open to what people experience, and they just don't want to be known as the uncle of somebody who believes they've been abducted. But so they're all four different people, and they were all in about the same age. They're all between 55 and 60, and all of their experiences or abductions began when they were really young children, and they continued right up through their adult life. One of them, it's still happening. The other three, it seemed to have stopped about 10, 15 years ago. They haven't had anything since. But there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that a little later. Some of them have had more experience than the others. Some of them had just a few experiences. But when I started to sit down to write the book, I was trying to figure out a way to bring the readers into really experiencing what these individuals felt. And so I decided, instead of writing the book as in past tense and said like she saw and she felt, I decided to write it in a way as if you're reading a screenplay, that it's all in the present tense. So, and if you read it very slowly, you can actually experience, what they were experiencing. So I don't know if it works or not. It's the first time I tried this with any book I did, and but the
that's
people
a unique
that
take
are
on
involved in it, they seem to like it. So
yeah, that's definitely a unique take on doing it. I've not read any books from people who have done these kind of encounter books before that would put it into the present, present first person kind of perspective.
I just thought, because all the time it's always like in the past tense. She and you can, do more with that. You can write it more like a novel that way. But I wanted to try to bring it to life a little bit, and I've had people criticize the way I've done it, saying it you don't get the flavor. But I'm saying, well, try to read it really slow, and think about it. Try to put yourself in their shoes when you're reading it, and I think it comes across pretty good when you do that. But it's one of these books I think you have to decide to do that and try to get your mind around it. But in any event, they're all different stories. I don't know what you want me to say about them. Do you want me to talk about some of their individual experiences? How would you like me to?
Sure, whatever you'd like to do, whatever you feel direction you want to go, that'd be fine by me.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'll get Pierre Mahar out of the way first. Pierre Mahar is a real name. It's a real person, and he was the guy who actually had the apoplectic fit at the first meeting that we went to. He's a professional musician, and he was actually born in Montreal, but lived most of his adult life in the Brantford area here of southwestern Ontario. And in the 1970s, he was a member of a band called Whiskey Hollow, which was one of Canada's first country rock bands. And his life experiences began when he was really a young kid. He was about 6 years old, and his mother took him to the train to Montreal, where they were visiting his grandmother, who was sick in a convent. And I don't know how sick she was, but she was bedridden, and he came along with the mother. And while the mother was visiting her mother in the bed, he went to wander around the convent and happened to be in a room. And he, now you got to remember, like, this is a little kid who knows nothing about UFOs or space aliens or anything like that. So he's being brought up Catholic, and so in a religious family. So he goes into this room, and the room is filled with, I guess, lots of crucifixes on the walls and religious artifacts and pictures of Jesus and everything like that. And as he's playing in the room, suddenly he says that the wall opens in front of him, and it's like a mirror, and this face comes through the wall. And again, he has no knowledge of aliens or anything, but this face terrifies him, and he thinks it's the face of the devil. And it scares the hell out of him, and he goes running out of that room and scared as he can, goes back into the mother, and he starts screaming and yelling, and of course they don't believe anything he says because he's only a 6-year-old kid, right? So they calm him down, and he thinks he's seeing the devil, and the mother says, no, it's, you're just, a little scared, you're in a new place, and so he doesn't think much of it. So that's the very first time he has his experience. I'll get to more about what happens to him later on in life, but I think what I'll do is I'll tell you all the first experiences of all of them, because they all happen when they were little kids. So
sure, that sounds good.
Yeah, so let's go to, Kelly McLean. She is, at the time, she actually is born in California, and she lived most of her young life in California and moved to Canada about 40 years ago. So she's been here 40 years ago. She met her husband in California. He was a Canadian, and they decided to come up here to make a life up here. And they spent their life, in the farming community, and they ran an organic store and a health food store, and she was an interior decorator for many years. But her first experience is a pretty interesting one. She's about 6 years old, and they live in an area called Pacoima in the Los Angeles area. And her father always, on every weekend, liked to take the family up to the wilderness for trips, because he hunted deer a lot. And they used to travel along what is called the Old Ridge Route, which I believe was a road that wasn't the highway that it is now, but back then it was a 2-lane road that went through the mountains between North Los Angeles and Bakersfield. And they would do that quite often. But this one day they're having a picnic, and they're just about to pack up and go home, when all of a sudden she and her father and everybody else in the car, it's her mother and her older brother, they see this, what they think is a small airplane about to crash in the mountains. And the father gets very excited, and it goes down. They don't hear any crash, they don't see any flames or anything, but the father says, well, we've got to go check it out, because there might be survivors, and we just got to go see if we can help anybody. So they get in the car, and they travel, and that's when it becomes strange for Kelly, because what she remembers, and she remembered this under hypnosis too, the exact same thing, is that they're at the site where there's a clearing and in the mountains there, and they believe they should be seeing a plane crash. But when they get there, there's no plane that has crashed whatsoever. And as Kelly's looking out the window of the car, she sees something in the distance, but she can't really make it out just yet. But by the side of the road, she sees these small little, and she calls them shadow figures, because even though it's not that far away, she can't make out any features other than they look like small humans. And she looks back in the car, and her father's missing. He's not there. And her mother is fast asleep in the front seat, and her brother beside her, he's fast asleep. She can't wake either of them up, but she doesn't know where her father is. So she stares out the window again, looking around, and suddenly she sees what she thinks is a log cabin, and the log cabin is decorated with Christmas lights. Now, this is in July, as far as she can remember, but it looks like a restaurant to her with Christmas lights, and she decides, well, my father must be there, and he's hungry, and I'm hungry. I want to go see him. So she gets out of the car, and she goes towards the restaurant, and the next thing she remembers is that she's being helped up this black ramp into the restaurant. She can't make out who's beside her, but she knows somebody is helping her up into the restaurant. And when she gets inside, she quickly realizes it's not a restaurant. Instead, it's a circular room. The walls are, I believe she said, dull gray and smooth, and there's a soft light coming from everywhere. And she feels the inside is cool, but she's not really cold. And as she looks around, she sees there's another smaller room off to the side. And when she looks into that smaller room, she sees numerous tables with lights over top of them, and there are other humans lying on these tables. And there are very small beings all around these tables, and as she looks closer, she distinctly sees her father as one of the people lying on the table. And he's naked. He doesn't have any clothes on, and neither does anybody else. And she begins to get really worried about what they're doing to her father and who these people are. But again, seconds later, her mind is not looking at that room anymore. She's back in the room where she was, and she's looking at a bench with, she believes there's 4 people sitting on the bench, and 3 of them are just sort of in a trance. One of them is a man with a plaid shirt. She distinctly remembers that, and he looks very upset and very concerned and very worried, and she senses that he's worried too. And she remembers going over to him and putting her arm on the man just to try to comfort her, even though she's 6 years old. And again, she's looking around this room and doesn't really know what's going on, but then she sees a console, another part of the room, and behind this console is this tiny creature with big oval eyes like we normally say the Greys have, and he's got a shiny black uniform on with a little, basically a baseball cap on his head. Now, it sounds really funny and strange, but that's what she's seeing, and in her mind, she calls him the little captain. And she remembers clearly that she doesn't feel afraid or not. In fact, she thinks she's looking at a Chinese or a Japanese person because she's got a friend, a very close friend who's Japanese back in her neighborhood. And in her mind, this guy looks Japanese to her. He didn't have the big oval eyes that the other Greys had. He had more kind of slitty eyes a little bit, but he had the same color and the same height. And so in her mind, she's looking at some Japanese guy or a Chinese guy, and he's got very pale skin, and she distinctly hears a telecommunication with them. And one of the things that this creature asks her is, "Why aren't you afraid?" And she doesn't know why she's not afraid, but she isn't. She has no fear whatsoever. She just is more in wonderment about what's going on. And then she asks him a question. She says, "Well, who are you? Where am I? Where am I from?" And again, telepathically, the creature says to her, "You wouldn't understand." And even though she's 6 years old, she becomes indignant about that. She says, "Well, I'm a smart kid. I know things. Just like, where are you? Who are you?" And he waves his hand towards the wall, and suddenly the wall turns into a giant screen. It looks like rippling water, and all of a sudden she sees thousands and thousands of stars through this screen, and they're all moving very, very fast. And when he asks her again, "This is where you are," and she says, "Oh, in the sky?" And the creature says, see, you don't understand. She doesn't know why she said sky, because she knows she was looking at, outer space, but she said sky, and then she tries to correct herself, but the creature doesn't want to hear anything about it. The next thing she knows, she's back in the car, and they're driving back home, but it's nighttime now, and nobody says a word in the car whatsoever, except when they see the lights of Los Angeles, the father turns to people in the car and says, how did it get so dark so fast? But nobody talks about what happened, and she says the rest of her life nobody talks about it, as if it didn't happen, but she remembers it clearly happened. And to the point where a few years ago, the brother who was in the car, he was dying of pancreatic cancer, and on his deathbed, she asked him if he remembers seeing anything strange on the ridge route that day, and she specifically asked him, do you remember seeing the house with Christmas lights? And he said, this is a guy that's been bedridden and can't move, but when she asked that, he sits up in bed and says to her, I don't remember the Christmas lights, but I sure remember all the ambulances. And so that was her thing as a 6-year-old. Do we need to take a break yet, or do you want me to still continue?
Yep, actually, I was just about ready to say, we'll go ahead and take a break here real quick. This would be a great spot for it. When we come back, if you don't mind, I will also take phone calls if anybody wants to call in and ask any questions. I have a couple of questions from the Late Night in the Midlands chat room as well.
Encounters to tell you about for the 2 other people.
Sounds great. We will be right back. If it's possible, can you put yourself on hold, mute your phone, because I don't have a way to cut your sound while the commercials are going. So
okay, I'll see if I can do that.
Okay. If not, no big deal. Okay, guys, we will take a break here. We will be back in just a few minutes. Stick around with us. Hang on. Thank you very much. Open Eyes is dedicated to finding the truth in all matters. We are not afraid to be politically incorrect or to ask questions. Whether it is the paranormal, government cover-ups, the dark agenda that the puppet masters have in store for us, or aliens and UFOs, nothing remains hidden. Listen to Open Eyes, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on LateNightInTheMidlands.com or OpenEyesNetwork.com. Open hearts, open minds, open eyes. Fear. There is always so much to fear. So many shadows are just waiting for the moment for when we pay no attention at all. Just waiting for the moment when they can grab us and make us come undone. Fear takes, and fear gives nothing in return. But there is one gift in this life that fear is afraid of. The gift of love. Reach out for someone today. Fear nothing, for fear is nothing. Live hard. The Late Night in the Midlands radio network is deeply devoted to you, the listener. We feel it is necessary to bring you all of the information that you can use in your life. Each and every day you will find something to listen to here. And whether you come away from the shows informed, inspired, or entertained, it is our passion. We don't bow to corporations, and we don't have handlers to tell us what not to talk about. We bring you everything. Late Night in the Midlands, however, is fully listener-supported. We need your help to stay on the air and to make sure that we get the bills paid. We need your help to keep the truth alive. If you feel that you have gotten anything out of Late Night in the Midlands, we would appreciate your support. You can become a subscriber and help us out on a monthly basis, or if you'd like, a one-time donation is fully appreciated as well. Every year, the average household in America spends over $3,000 on entertainment alone. If you could help us with just a tiny fraction of that amount, you would make all of the difference. Go to LateNightInTheMidlands.com and click on the subscribe button. Thank you, and as always, keep yourself informed.
What do you plan to do about crime in our city?
A lot. Because that's what Jesus wants. 9/11 was bad.
I agree with that. What are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
9/11.
What about our traffic problem?
9/11.
In the heart of this great city, we saw tragedy arrive on a quiet morning. September the 11th. September the 11th. September the 11th.
September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. September 11th. 2001. Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Saddam Saddam
Saddam.
Saddam 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 Saddam
Saddam.
Saddam Hussein.
War and danger. Continuing danger.
Hour of danger.
Very, very dangerous world.
A grave new threat.
Horrific acts of atrocities. Murderous regimes dedicating to killing us. Tyranny and terror. Slaughtered thousands.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction. Weapons programs.
The deadliest of weapons.
Terrible weapons. Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Poison gas.
Torture chambers. Mass graves.
Deadly technologies.
Radical ideology of hate.
Terror of threats.
Terror.
Terror.
Terror. War on terrorism. War against terrorism.
Global war on terror.
Global terrorism. 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 Terrorism.
Terrorism.
Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. Terrorism. The evil terrorists. 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 Terrorists.
Terrorist. 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 Terrorist.
Terrorist.
Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists.
Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists. Terrorists.
Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands. As you can hear, I am not Michael Vera. He would normally be hosting the show, but Michael Vera was sick tonight. If you're just tuning in, I described that at the beginning. But he is very ill tonight, and he asked if I would be able to take over things for the evening tonight, and I was glad to do so. We're having a wonderful conversation tonight with Bob Mitchell. Bob Mitchell is a field investigator for MUFON and just has some absolutely fascinating encounters with people that have experienced things over the years, and I am really enjoying the conversation tonight. Bob, are you still there with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
All right. Awesome. Before the break, you were talking about the encounter that what was it, Kathy had?
Kelly?
Kelly. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm bad with
on
names.
the Ridge Road. On the Ridge Road, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to ask, and by the way, we will take phone calls. If you guys want to call in, please do so. Well, we're going to welcome them. The phone number is 260-494-3937. I ask that if you call in, please mute your phone or mute your Skype. If you want to get a hold of us on Skype as well, we're at JDA Film. It's a little bit different than what the normal one is. But if you want to get a hold of us, please mute yourself so that we're not like trying to overtalk with you guys in the background. So before we hit the break, you were describing the encounter that she had, Bob. And one of the things that I was wondering is how much of that kind of mind control stuff did you see happening in this kind of encounter? Like she was describing seeing the house with Christmas lights, and they kind of like overlay everything on the mind to show you what you, I guess, be most comfortable with.
Yeah.
To make you not afraid.
I think that happens a lot. Christmas is a good time for everybody. What I've figured out from at least the 4 people that I interviewed for this book is that when they're young, when they're children, they do, whoever they are, whatever kind of entities they are, whether they're dimensional beings or beings from another planet, they simply can control the situation that they're in, and they somehow know what makes you comfortable and what doesn't make you comfortable. And for a little kid, Christmas has a special meaning. So in her mind, she sees something that's a restaurant, which is a nice place to be, and the Christmas trees, that's a nice place to be. Jackie Reiser, another one of the people I interviewed, she has an experience where she's on a dock looking out over the lake, and she sees Christmas trees floating in the sky. Again, she knew that her eyes tell her she's seeing Christmas trees. Her mind is telling her it can't possibly be that, but she's relaxed and she doesn't have any fear whatsoever. So they always somehow get you to feel less fear as a child. When you get older, it doesn't work as well. But everybody I talked to said they felt far more fear as an adult than they did as a child.
That's very fascinating. Like I said, I wonder if that's maybe something that's telepathic or maybe a technology that they have. Do you maybe have an idea with that?
I think they probably, whatever they are, I think they can read your mind. They know what makes you happy, what makes you sad. Kelly told me that she used to have these horrible nightmares, even as a child. She used to see the faces in the ceiling, in the sky, that looked like gray aliens looking down at her all the time, and she was frightened. And in her mind, she heard somebody say, "Next time you see this, think of deer." And she was so used to seeing deer in the wilderness because her father always went and hunted deer that it was just something she was very familiar with. And that did calm her down. So whether it was something that was in her mind, but it seems like a strange thing for a little kid to think about.
Something like maybe a post-hypnotic suggestion or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Very cool. So the next person that you had in line, what would their name be and what's their story?
Well, this is a very interesting person. This is Marjorie Anderson. And probably one of the most interesting experiencers anybody will ever encounter at this point, because Marjorie is completely deaf. And during my research, I never came across anybody who has ever come out and said that they have experienced abductions or entities in their bedroom and they were deaf. There may be deaf experiences out there, but nobody has ever talked about it as far as I know. And I looked everywhere and put in every search engine you could find. And,
I'm very curious about this one because I'm disabled myself. I'm blind, so I wonder if this is like something too. Okay. So there you go.
That's another interesting thing, because I was just talking with Marianne the other day, and I wondered if there are any blind experiencers, because I don't know if I've ever heard of that either. I don't know. Have you?
I have not. No, and that is very curious. I wonder if there's something that happens with that, with the census.
She grew up in a Toronto orphanage. Her mother was a Catholic orphanage, and she was a premature birth, and her mother gave her up right after birth, and so she never really knew who her mother was, and she lived in the orphanage for most of her first 3 years of life. But when she was almost from the point she could remember things, she had hearing, but it was very painful. Noise was just amplified to the point where kids yelling and screaming she cried all the time because she was in such pain all the time. And her first encounter, she clearly remembers lying in a crib and in this orphanage, and one night 3 beings came around her crib, and she thinks she was almost 2 years old at the time, and they touched her ears. And at that point, she went completely deaf, but she was no longer in any pain. And in some ways, they helped her. But you can imagine that somebody that is deaf most of her life, she's now, I believe, 58, so she's had these encounters all her life. It's difficult enough for somebody who's not handicapped to tell people about their encounters and what's happened to them. Can you imagine somebody who's lived in silence all their life, keeping these secrets hidden for 50 years, not being able to express in basically sign language what's been happening to her? Who's going to believe her? The deaf community, I mean, I don't know how close-knit they are, but I can't imagine her going out and telling somebody what's happened to her and being able to express it. So when she sought me out, we first had a lot of difficulty trying to figure out how to explain what she was feeling and how she could communicate with me, because I would send her stuff on the email, and she would write back things, but it didn't seem to be the answers to the questions that I was asking her. And I could never quite figure that out, why. And then I just kept trying, and then we decided to get some sign language interpreter at her house, and I went to her house where the sign language interpreter was able to interpret her feelings to me. And the real strange thing about it is that over the several interviews that I did at her house, it got to the point where she became so comfortable with me talking to me that she spoke to me without the sign language, and I could understand what she was saying to me, even though it wasn't, crisp or clear English. I could still understand what she was saying, and I've seen her many times since, and she actually got up in front of one of our MUFON audiences the last meeting, and she spoke to them without sign language. And it's almost like she's been brought out of her shell after being unburdened with these hidden secrets that she's had all these years. It's really been a tremendous, almost a gift for her to be able to tell her story to me. And the other lady is a lady named Jackie Reeser. She's an artist and a photo restorer, and it's her diagram that's on the cover of the book. It's the mantis that she experienced. But her first encounter started when she was about 11 or 12 at a family cottage in northeastern Ontario, and her encounters for the first few years basically involved seeing craft in the sky and not knowing what they were. But there was one instance where she's watching a craft, and suddenly in her mind she has this feeling with the words, "They're coming." And at this point she has no idea who they are. She tries to tell her family what she's seen and what's in her mind, and of course they think she's just crazy, making it up, and she's 11 or 12 years old, and don't bother us, go back to bed. And so she goes to bed that night, and she's trying to sleep, but at some point she senses that she's not alone, and she's very fearful. But She peers over the covers, and there, standing at the foot of her bed, are three, I guess, extraterrestrial biological entities, the Ebes or Greys, and one is a little taller, but the other two are smaller, and they've got the traditional egg shape. And her whole room's engulfed in a silvery blue light. And again, she thinks it's cold, almost the same sense that Kelly had in the spaceship, but her body's not cold. And Jackie, almost even at a young age, she has this same theme that actually goes through her whole life, is that she realizes at a young age that these creatures are very, very thin, very skinny, to the point where it wouldn't take a lot for her to snap their necks in two. And when she thinks that, they disappear, and blackness occurs. And almost all of them, all the encounters they've had, ends in a like a blackness where there's nothing else, and then the next thing they know, they're in their room, or they're in their bed, or they're somewhere else, but the experience ends. But throughout her life, Jackie Reeser always has this feeling that, I could just take their necks and snap them, and they wouldn't be very hard to beat.
Very, very interesting. That would, man, that is a really weird experience.
Yeah. Like a 11-year-old saying, I can really rough you up.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of kids out there that think that they're tough, but
Yeah.
Huh. Very cool. I like that one. I think probably the most. That one I can really kind of dig, I guess.
Yeah. Their experiences with the mantids are quite different than the experience with the Greys.
I was about ready to ask. We had a question about the mantid aliens, wondering how much of an influence they have as opposed to the Greys on the world, basically.
Well, both Jackie and Kelly have had mantid experiences. Marianne thinks she might have had one, but she doesn't recall it, other than that she has a strong feeling about it. But Kelly's experience is very, very strange. She's 10 years old. It's actually her 10th birthday. And again, it's in California. And she's just come home from visiting her close friend down the street. And she lives near an intersection, and right across the street is a vacant lot. Except on this morning when she's coming home, it's not a vacant lot. There's actually a house standing in the vacant lot. And she's completely confused, because she's like, what's this house doing in this vacant lot? It shouldn't be there. And so she goes into the house. She remembers going up, the black stairs into the house like she did in the other place. And lo and behold, when she gets into the house, of course, it's not a house. She's in a spaceship again, and but this time it's one room. It's not like it was on the Ridge Road where there was two rooms. It's just completely one room, and she notices on one side of the wall there's a whole wall of what she believes are fish tanks. But as she gives a closer look at it, she actually sees infants in these fish tanks tied to something. I guess they're more like fetuses than infants, but she's a 10-year-old girl. She's thinking what she's actually seeing at the time. But she's staring at this, and she has no idea what this is all about. And so she's looking around the whole room. And suddenly, she sees a table at the center of the room, and she describes it as a table, but I really think it's more of an elevated floor that seems to go around the room, and that's where these glass containers are behind the room. They look like fish tanks, and there's a fluorescent green light in these fish tanks with these infants. She stares at it and keeps staring at it, and all of a sudden, to her right, she sees this creature that's dressed in a white, it looks like a white medical coat. And in her mind, she's calling this the doctor. That's what enters her mind. It's the doctor, and it's standing with a white lab coat. And she has a feeling that this doctor is female. Now, the way Kelly describes it is it's basically a giant insect. And it's standing about 8 feet tall. And again, she has no fear of this. And not only does she have no fear of this, but she has this strange, overpowering feeling that she knows this creature and that she has a strong sense of love for this creature. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm standing in the middle of the room and I look over and suddenly I see an 8-foot-tall insect-like creature, I'm going to be freaking out.
Yeah, you and me too. I have an affinity with mantises. I have such a fascination with them, but that would really freak me.
I mean, I would just be freaking out. Never mind little grays. I think an 8-foot creature that had arms looking like an insect, freaking out, and then it has big eyes and it has a very thin mouth and extremely tall, very thin. She describes it as being wrinkled and light tan, and it didn't have any ears. But she also senses that it's a very old being. And this being Kelly's 10th birthday, because the doctor has wrinkled skin, she asked the doctor how old she is. And again, and telepathically, the only answer she gets back is that I'm very, very old and that you wouldn't understand again. So they have this conversation telepathically, and throughout the whole conversation, Kelly likes her very much. She's happy to be with her. She describes the way she moves as being graceful and very slinky, moving across the room, and almost this. Even though she looks like an insect, she has this human quality about her, and she seems to be in control too. And I think a lot of people have had mantis experiences always say that they seem to be the ones controlling the gray creatures, and there are some gray creatures in this. I guess it's a spaceship that she's in, although she thinks she's still in the house. But they don't seem to have any interaction. At some point, the creature touches her shoulder, and Kelly receives a telepathic thought that says, "We're doing very important work here." But the doctor doesn't seem to explain what that work is, only that she tells Kelly that she's a very special person to their work. And then she asks Kelly if she would like to hold a baby. And, of course, Kelly does, and the next thing she knows, she's holding a very tiny baby that's wrapped in a cloth, and it has dark eyes. The strange thing about that is that there have been many people who have reported abductions where they see babies, but it's usually older adults who have the sense that these babies have some connection to them. Now, Kelly being 10 years old, there's no way the baby would have had any connection to her, but she seems to love this baby as much as she loves the mantis, and she doesn't want to give up the baby, but she has to. And so reluctantly, she hands the baby back to the mantis. Then the next thing she remembers is that she's still in this room, and there's another larger tank in the middle of the room, and she thinks it's made of glass, and again, it's filled with this liquid, and she says it looks like green jello. And the doctor telepathically again tells her that she has to go into the tank. Now, Kelly's really afraid of going in this tank. That's when her fear starts kicking in, because she's 10 years old, but she can't swim. And in fact, when she was 2, she almost drowned in an accident that, and she's never learned to swim since then. So she has this great fear of water, but somehow she ends up in the tank, and she thinks it's going to be cold, but it's not. It's warm, and to her surprise, she can breathe under this green liquid, and she isn't afraid. She feels safe and almost giddy and happy being in the tank again. And again, she has this telepathic thought that where the mantis says to her that you're a good girl, you're being a good girl, you're doing well. And then when she's finished with her next memory is that she's running out of the home, and she has to get home. And so she finally goes home, and even though she's 10 years old, as she's running home, her stomach starts to hurt very, very bad, and she can't figure out what it is. And when she gets home, she ends up, going to the washroom, and suddenly at 10 years old, she ends up having her period. And the mother, thinks that's strange at 10 years old, but she doesn't think there's, it's just one of those things that happens. And she doesn't tell her mother anything about what's just happened, but she's really looking forward to going back and seeing this mantis the next day. In fact, she's all night long, she's thinking about it. She can't wait to get up the next morning and go back, and she just loved everybody in that house. And she gets up and gets dressed and runs out the front door to go to this house. And when she gets there, it's just a vacant lot. And she doesn't know what's going on. So that's a pretty strange story for her.
Yeah, most definitely. At 10 years old, that would be really frightening, I would think. I mean, especially looking back on it in the memories.
Now, Jackie's version of her mantis is that they moved her. She's married in the early 1990s. By then, she's married and she's living in this old home in Lake Simcoe area. And ever since they moved into that home, in the hallway near the bedroom and near the bathroom, she's always had this eerie feeling in the hallway. It's just nowhere else in the house does she get this feeling, but when she's standing there, something feels strange. And she describes it as an energy spot. And she's had friends over, and she doesn't tell them about this area. She just wants to see if they sense something. And everybody, all her relatives, and any friend that ever comes in the house always had a very strange feeling standing in that spot. So one night, she gets out of bed, and she's walking in that spot, and of course she doesn't remember leaving the bed, but she's standing in the hallway, and she suddenly becomes aware of a presence nearby, and she looks to her left, and there, standing right beside her, is this mantis creature again, only her mantis creature, she has a feeling that's a male, and even though the ceiling's about 7 feet tall, this guy is clearly higher than that, and it's as if his head has gone right through the ceiling in this blue, whitish light, that somehow the matter has changed, and he's there, and she's staring at it. And like Kelly, she's not afraid, too. She feels almost in love with it again.
Can't take your call now. At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, simply hang up or press the pound key for further options.
I'm still hearing somebody try to call in. I don't know what that was there.
Yes.
But anyway, she can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So she's standing in this bright blue light that's engulfing her and this creature, and she has a sense that she's known this creature all her life, and has this, and that the creature has a love for her, and she's got a love for it, but it's more like a parent love for a child, and she can't explain it because, as far as she knows, she's never seen this creature before, and as far as she knows, she's never seen this creature again. But it's wearing some kind of a see-through cloak that seems to be made of light. But she's talking to telepathically, and she remembers clearly this creature looking at her and pointing towards the wall and in her bedroom and saying, "This is how they come into your room." And as he says this, his arm makes 3 distinct movements. Just like a mantis would, I guess, 3 movements. Or they don't just, your arm just doesn't go straight. It's just like almost like a jerking motion. She says she's not afraid, but she becomes angry because she wants to ask him a whole bunch of other questions, but she can't get it out. In her mind, she's got all these questions like, "Who are you? Where do you come from? What are you doing here?" But it won't come out of her mouth. And that's the same way with Kelly says. Like, she has these questions, but she can't get it out. They sort of block your ability to say what's on your mind. And the creature then disappears, and she's more angry than afraid about what she saw. And at the time, she had never ever heard of a mantid before, never even seen a mantid, and it was several years later when she was actually looking on the internet where she came across a picture of what she had saw that night, because up till then, all the known pictures she had seen were of grays. No one ever knew about the mantids, but again, the mantids, peaceful, loving, not fearful, no terror whatsoever involved in them.
Very, very interesting.
I think that's what most people who have had mantid encounters will say.
That's very interesting, yeah, and I wonder how much of that kind of relates to history as well, but we'll get to that in just a second. We do have a phone call for you.
Sure.
Give us your first name. I think I know who this is, but let's give it a shot.
Hi, Ira and Bob. This is Dina, and I'm from Spokane, Washington.
Hello, Dina. How are you?
Hi, Bob.
Hello, Dina.
Good. What's that, Bob?
How's the weather on the West Coast?
Yes. Actually, a month ago, I reported to MUFON a sighting that I had, and one of my questions to you is have you noticed people talking about having sightings with the chemtrail issue?
Yeah, a lot of people seem to see things before the chemtrail happen and after the chemtrails happen. They see them in the clouds. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't taking pictures. I did have somebody send me a picture several months ago. In fact, she sent me dozens and dozens of pictures of clouds and chemtrails, and she said, see, there's something there, and I couldn't see anything. I kept looking at these pictures and kept blowing them up, and I thought she was just seeing things, and then one day I'm blowing up a picture, and damned if I didn't see a round black object right in the middle of one of the chemtrails. So I thought, my God, there is something there. I don't know what it is.
Well, that's
certainly not a plane.
That's very interesting. I was just driving along, and, I take photos of chemtrails all the time, but I was driving my car, and I looked over, and I saw this is after the plane's been gone, so the chemtrails were already been sprayed, and there was a large silver disc object. It looked like liquid metal, and the sunshine was hitting it. And when I saw it, it just let out this huge burst of light, and then that burst of light sucked back into itself, and it was completely gone.
Yeah, was the chemtrail diagonally or straight up and down?
It was sideways.
Sideways. Because I saw one a month ago that was really strange. I was driving, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, what the hell is that? And it was a chemtrail, but it went straight up, and like from the ground straight up into the air. And I stopped the car, and I looked at it in the distance, and I said, well, what would make that? Like, a plane couldn't go up from the ground and go straight up in the air, but this thing stayed in the sky for, a good 10, 15 minutes where it didn't dissipate. So I have no idea what that was, but obviously it's something that took off and went straight up in the air. But I didn't see anything.
Well,
I was just going to say,
I've seen really interesting. Oh, sorry, Ira, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I've seen some like videos and stuff of people that have taken like the chemtrails, videos of the chemtrails, and that they've seen different things like floating down from them. They've seen like weird things like almost like a foamy kind of a material, like foam from a bathtub or something like that. The bubbles from the bubble bath and stuff. That like it instantly vaporizes when you touch them, but they kind of conglomerate together. And I wonder how much of all that kind of stuff is related.
I don't know, but I've never seen one straight up and down like this one was. But,
yeah, me either. Go ahead, Dina.
Well,
I'm sorry.
For the past few years, I've been having a lot of sightings and getting closer and closer to my home. And all of my life, I've had experiences where I wake up in the morning and I notice tiny incisions on me. And then within a day, they're just healed and gone. And so, I always thought, well, maybe I scratched myself, but they were always like on my abdomen or on my wrist or on the inside of my thigh. And this has been happening all of my life. And it's just kind of strange how the past few years I've been seeing more and more and more sightings.
Well, it's interesting you said that. Yeah, it's interesting you said that. Kelly McLean, one of the ladies that I wrote about, when she was a child, she has this memory of being out in the backyard with her dog and deciding she had to feed her dog. So she opened the can of dog food and used the can to scoop out some food. And as she went to scoop out the food, she hit her knee and took a chunk of flesh out of her knee. And the flesh dropped into the dog dish. The dog ate the flesh. She got so scared she ran into the house, didn't want to tell her parents, and didn't want to look at the cut on her knee. And after dinner, she went to look at the cut on the knee, and there was absolutely no cut on the knee. But she knows she was outside, but she doesn't believe she was actually feeding the dog. She doesn't know what was going on. But about 25 years later, where she had the cut on the knee, overnight one night, a red line appeared right on the spot where she was, as if somebody had used a laser to open it up and look to see what was in there, and then closed it up again. So she has no explanation for that.
Yes, I have no memories of, any beings, like an abduction experience, but I've had such prophetic dreams and things shown to me, so I'm trying to, figure out where these incisions are coming from, how come I'm seeing sightings closer to my home, and why I'm getting messages through dreams, and trying to connect all of it.
Well, I mean, they may not be dreams. That's the first thing I would say. You may think they're dreams, but you may actually be seeing something somewhere where you're not aware you've gone to see it. So,
I was going to suggest that as well.
They've all had some visions like that.
Okay.
So it's quite common. You're not alone in that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Bob.
You're welcome, Dina.
Any other questions for me, Dina?
No. Thank you, Ira.
Okay. Thank you so much for calling. Much appreciated.
Yep. Have a great evening. Thank you.
You too.
Good. Bye-bye.
So, Bob, let me ask this question then, relating to, I guess, sort of what she had as a question and things that I've seen in my life and in different people that I've talked to. How much of a correlation do you think there is between a lot of the experiencers, whether that's by seeing UFOs or actually seeing or speaking to alien beings and entities, whatever you want to call them, and the paranormal? Do you think that there's any kind of a correlation between those two, or have you seen like that people who have had experiences seem to have more of a experiences as well with the paranormal and that sort of thing?
Well, when Kelly was having her experiences as an adult when she lived in Canada, she had some very terrifying experiences involving being in her bedroom alone. Her husband was at work, her son is at school, and feeling that a sense that, and actually hearing footsteps on her stairs coming up to the bedroom, feeling paralyzed, overcome with just the incredible fear that she thought she was going to die, and having a presence in her room. And when these were happening to her, and when they were over, she really thought that it was a paranormal experience, that it was a ghost-like experience that was entering her house. But she had it several times, and each time it got to the point where, again, she was hearing telepathically, don't worry, we're coming through your home, we'll be coming up the stairs, don't worry, don't be afraid, we're not going to hurt you. So a ghost wouldn't probably say those things. And at some point, she was able to see entities standing in her bedroom, again, the Greys. So, but she originally thought it was paranormal, and ghosts was what the first thing that came to her mind. And she's not the only one. There's I haven't written about this yet, and I'm hoping to do my next book on them. It's a mother and daughter who have had experiences together all their lives, and they lived in what they thought was a haunted house for many years, and they used to to see and hear footsteps coming up the stairs, and it wasn't until they moved to another part of Ontario where, again, the footsteps were coming up the stairs, except when they finally came up the stairs, it was hooded creatures in a monk-like gowns that dragged them out of bed and whisked them away somewhere. So they thought they were paranormal at the beginning, but then it turned out it wasn't.
So one other question for you then as well, not related to that one, but it's one that I'm kind of curious about. Over the years, of course, you've had a lot of different conversations with people, and I'm sure between all of the different conversations, you've had a lot of different information about different types of UFOs. Like you hear some people talking about the metal type ones, or the kind of more physical, I guess you could say, crafts, and then others will talk about the more energy type of crafts and that sort of thing. What do you think about the differences between those two? Do you think that there really is a difference? How much do you think maybe it's man-made or anything along those lines?
Well, the strange thing is that 4 people that I talked to, 3 of them have seen crafts, and the crafts that they've seen are basically your run-of-the-mill oval-shaped flying saucer. In fact, Jackie Reeser, the first one she saw, she started laughing to herself because she couldn't believe that she was actually seeing a flying saucer, and it looked like a flying saucer she'd seen on all the television shows. Like, she couldn't believe, that's exactly what they look like. So Kelly has seen those, but Kelly also had a strange encounter where it was almost like an ice cube shaped vehicle that landed on a driveway when she lived in the desert in California with her cousin for about a year, and it was clear, like she could see right through it, and she ended up being on that craft, and that was a craft where she was taken and saw a couple of visions that I can talk about later on if you want, but she never saw any of the cigar-shaped ones. She never saw the things that more look like, Star Trek type vehicles. It was always this round circle thing.
Very interesting. I had one of those kind of energy UFO encounters myself as well. I was working for a company basically delivering railroad workers from one location to another, and I had basically about 15 people were in my van with me, and I'm driving them down the highway. As we're driving down the highway, we saw this bright light sort of appearing behind us on the highway, and this light got closer and closer, and I mean, it just kind of came up on us really, really fast, right? And then when it got to the same level basically as we were, it slowed down. It slowed down to our speed, kind of sat there for a couple of seconds, and then took off right down the road much faster than we had seen it approach. And it was a very freaky experience. We had to pull the car over, and we're like, what the heck was that?
Well, I mean, I would love to see something like that. I haven't encountered actual, a craft yet, but I keep looking. I'm always looking in the sky.
You're kind of experiencing vicariously.
Many people have seen the giant triangles, that look like the size of a football field. I haven't seen them, so.
Gotcha. So you mentioned the TV shows there a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about her, and I wonder, what is your take on all of the different TV shows that you see popping up lately? With aliens this and encounters that, and
I mean, there's more than ever. I mean, I think the subject now is so inbred in people's minds that they can't get enough of it. And more files have been released by, Project Blue Book, and more people are getting of the age now that they're retiring and they want to tell their stories before they die. And, disclosure, there's a big disclosure movement in the States, and there's one in Canada, too. In fact, I was just talking to, I always get his last name, pronounce it right. Maybe he's been on your show, Victor Vigio. He runs Disclosure Canada up here, and he's got some documents that he just got that came from a high-ranking official of the Canadian Air Force, and basically they admitted that over the last 5 years, they get an average of 1,800 encounters with unknown vehicles in the skies, and they've had 75 intercepts in the last 5 years. So there's more and more information coming out, and I mean, I guess we're on the road to eventually there will be disclosure, hopefully sooner than later, because I think, it's quite clear that something's going on. There's just too many people of important professions and pilots, not to mention the astronauts who have all seen things, and more pictures that are coming out daily on the internet. It's hard to say if some of them are real or some of them aren't, but there's certainly a lot of information out there that's piqued the interest of everybody to the point where, we're ready to find out what the truth is.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. One thing that I always try to express is that, there have been so many people over the years that have had encounters and experiences. So many over the years, thousands. Yeah. And out of all of these, a lot of them are very credible people. You have people that are high up in the military, law enforcement officers, judges, on and on and on. And out of all these people, if they were to, for example, go to a courtroom and testify in a murder case, their word would basically be taken as, law. Whatever they say would be the truth. But when it comes to the alien thing, suddenly they're no longer credible and they're not listened to. And it's a weird psychology, Yeah.
But I think more and more people are now realizing that there's something to it. I don't think people who talk about it are immediately considered crazy anymore. I just think there's obviously something that the government has hidden all these years, and it's not just the American government. The Russian government has it, the French government has UFOs, the Canadian government has had it. There's lots of things out there, and the files are hidden away, and one day soon I hope that at least some of it will be released. Maybe not all of it, but some of it will.
What do you think about some of the people that have come out saying that they were in the CIA and they're kind of whistleblowers, and we had encounters with these aliens and that aliens, and the government is involved in this, and Dulce and all that kind of stuff? What do you think about that? What's kind of your take on those stories?
Well, some of them are legitimate people. I mean, they're real people that investigators who have talked to them say, they did work in the CIA, they did work in government, they were at Roswell, they were at Area 51. And if they use their real name, I mean, they've got nothing to hide, except fearing that they'll be eliminated somehow for saying something that they shouldn't be saying. But I think we've got to the point now where the whistleblowers are saying things that the government knows is true, and they're just letting them say it. And I don't think they think it's going to go away anymore. I just think that they're preparing to release the truth. And I mean, I don't know if all these people that are making claims are actually telling the truth or delusional. I mean, there's so many people that are telling so many different stories about that. The government is in cahoots with certain species, and there's different greys, and there's good greys, there's bad greys, and there's reptilians, and there's the aliens, and all different kinds of species. I don't know. Is there one species here on Earth, or is there hundreds of species on Earth? I just don't know the answer. I mean, I wish I did, but I don't believe everybody is just making these stories up.
Right. If even just one of the stories is true, then that right there proves that everything is possible, And out of all of the thousands and thousands that have come out and said these things, you would think that at least one of them is telling the truth, you know?
And what seems to be the latest thing right now is that pictures from Mars and pictures from the moon that are popping up on the internet left and right that appear to show something that shouldn't be there, and even like buildings that seem to have been destroyed over time and collapsed, and things that certainly just don't look like rock formations. And we have those strange lights that are on the satellite Cirrus, I think that's how you pronounce it, that we saw last month, and all of a sudden we haven't heard much of it since. But apparently there are going to be some pictures coming back. Of course, there's always the story that the pictures we see are doctored by NASA, but the real pictures haven't been released, but some people have been able to find the real pictures, and who knows if they are or they're fakes. I can't tell you, but it makes sense. If the government doesn't want you to see something, they're going to find ways to not let you see it until they're ready to let you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
and
that,
even then, I'm not sure they're going to let you see the whole thing.
There you go. Exactly. Well, I mean, that would reveal that they're complicit in hiding all of these different things, and suddenly they're going to be, maybe not even out of a job, but a lot of people are going to be very, very angry about this thing.
Well, imagine if you're the public relation crisis management guy that's in charge of trying to figure out how do we tell the public what's really been happening. How do you explain that after hiding it for all these years? What's the right way to explain it? I mean,
yeah, there's no easy way to do it.
I mean, do you have to have at one point you'd want to have the President of the United States with Putin, but right now you can't get that together, I'm sure. So I don't know how you do it, or who does it.
It would be a difficult conundrum. I know that, like in the past, it's been released that the different think tanks that were originally given the question of whether to release the information about aliens and the government complicity with it, they all basically said, don't do it because, of the religious reasons. It'll cause chaos, financial chaos, all of that kind of stuff. And that's been kind of the government's byline ever since, that's their working order.
But don't you think you'd have to have, at least the President of the United States standing on the same podium at the same time they announce this?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you could have the science director of some think tank calling a news conference saying, unless you had the alien standing beside him, right? but I can't imagine it being done without the President and whoever that's going to be, in 2016 doing it. I just don't know how you do it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I do think that there is something to the idea with the different whistleblowers that are coming out. I've said a few times over the past years that maybe they're not killed off or anything along those lines or stopped because these are things that the government really does want us to know. They just, again, kind of don't know exactly how to say it, so they'll just do it in this little sideline sort of way.
Remember when the Wikipedia stuff was being released? I mean, everybody was up in arms when all the secrets being released, but they also released stuff on the UFOs that didn't get much play. So if the government was all upset about the stuff that was being released, why would the UFO stuff be fake? I mean, it has to be some truth if it's there.
Right, exactly. My thought as well. Well, listen, Bob, we need to take a break here real quick. This will be our last break. When we come back, we're going to get into a couple of questions that we had come in from the chat room. And I'd like to hear definitely more about what you've got, like as far as the different experiences that you've talked to the other people about through the years. I have a couple of other questions for that as well.
Sure.
So, guys, stick around with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Fear. There is always so much to fear. So many shadows are just waiting for the moment for when we pay no attention at all. Just waiting for the moment when they can grab us and make us come undone. Fear takes, and fear gives nothing in return. But there is one gift in this life that fear is afraid of. The gift of love. Reach out for someone today. Fear nothing, for fear is nothing. Live hard. Have you been looking for answers? Have you been seeking the truth but can't seem to find it? Late Night in the Midlands has the answers for you. Whether you are interested in the paranormal, aliens and UFOs, alternative health information, or just a little hope and inspiration, we have a show for you. Late Night in the Midlands, The Secret Teachings, Open Eyes, Red Pill Reality Show, Brothers at Arms, and many more shows. All here on the L&M Network for you to listen to at any time that you want. Everything is free to listen to. And though it is not required, we are listener supported, and all donations are deeply appreciated. You will not find shows like these in the mainstream media. Go to latenightinthemidlands.com to listen. The L&M Network, where the truth has no fear. You may be suffering from OMS, Open Mind Syndrome. This disorder can be a burden on those suffering from it, as they see the insanity in the world around them. Symptoms of this disorder are likely to be not accepting the status quo, talking frequently about issues that are really important, studying things that are not acceptable by the mainstream thinking, and asking too many questions. This disease can spread rapidly, even over the internet and airwaves. It is becoming an epidemic. If you or someone you know suffers from open mind syndrome, do not seek help. It is apparent that this condition is actually the normal human response to information. In fact, it is best to interact often with fellow sufferers at latenightinthemidlands.com to remain open-minded. Open mind syndrome. It's no joke.
The L&M Radio Network and Late Night in the Midlands depends on you, the listener. Without you, there would be no us. So help us continue to bring you the best guests with the best information and subscribe today. Information on becoming an L&M subscriber can be found at the top of latenightinthemidlands.com. Just click the About Subscriptions tab and become part of the family while helping the truth stay alive. And while you're at it, maybe subscriptions aren't for you. A one-time donation helps as well. Click that donate button on the right side of latenightinthemidlands.com and help us help you.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to Late Night in the Midlands. I really appreciate you guys sticking around through that break. You know, we got to pay the bills, right? Tonight, Michael Vera had to call off sick, so he asked me if I could take over. My name is Ira, and I am normally the host of Open Eyes, which appears here on the Late Night in the Midlands network on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tonight, we're having a conversation with Bob Mitchell, and I have been finding it very fascinating. I'm really enjoying the conversation. Bob, we have about 20 minutes left. I wanted to ask you a question that came in through the chat here. Tommy was wondering if if you know anything about the experiment or experiments that are going on Earth, and like between the humans and the extraterrestrials, and maybe what you can tell about it.
Well, I only know what I've read. I don't have any in-depth knowledge, and I've not spoken to anybody who has talked to me about it. But what I have been led to believe, and this may not hit people the right way, but you're talking about the abductions and why people are being abducted?
I believe that's the question, yeah.
It's what I'm not saying I believe this, but the general feeling that I'm getting from people who have been investigating this of late is that the Greys are the only entity out there that actually has been doing the abductions, and the Greys are doing it in cohorts with the governments around the world, and it's a trade-off of technology versus allowing them to experiment on people. There's no other way to say it, is that we're, the American, I'm not saying it's the government themselves, but it's a rogue part or a black, dark part of the government who has made this, I guess you could say, deal with the devil in some ways, that in return for all the nice technology that we now have, from everything from smartphones to probably a lot more space quality ships than we even know about, these governments have allowed them to periodically take victims for experimentation, to do probably cloning, to do hybrid testing and return. And there is even some conjecture out there that not all of the people are returned, that some of them are used for a food source in some sense. I don't like to think about that, but that would explain why there is so many missing people across North America. And they can't all be missing because of serial killers. People just disappear, and they're never found again.
Yeah.
And, it's a horrible thing to think about, and I think if it is going on, that is one of the questions that the governments are going to have to wrestle with when they finally come clean about what's going on. And I can't imagine how they would ever be able to sell that to the public.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't see what kind of excuse or anything like that they could give besides just saying, well, we got stuff out of it.
Yeah. I mean, you got your cell phone and your, 85-inch flat screen TV that you can fold up now. I mean,
yeah, of course, 20 people had to be abducted and eaten for the price to pay for that. But you guys can enjoy that anyways, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just don't know how. As I said, it's a public relations nightmare to even figure out how they were going to do it. And maybe that's been one of the problems for the last 50 years, that they don't know how to tell us.
Yeah, well, one question then that I would have as well, and this is not from the chat, but this is from myself. I'm of Native American descent myself, from here in North America,
Mm-hmm.
and I know in Canada there are a lot of natives up there as well still. Yeah. Have you had any encounters with them that they've told you any of their stories?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because as I mentioned earlier, Les Such, who is the hypnotist that I work with and for the case that I've been researching, he has promised to take me to the Six Nations Reserve, which is actually very close to where I live, and they have a lot of strong connections to the phenomena that they say that they can summon the craft down at any given time during the night, during the summer months, that there's a very powerful connection between the UFO and the aliens, whatever it is, and the native cultures of North America. So I'm anxious to go out this summer to see from my own eyes what happens.
That would so fascinate me. I know from my experiences with talking to the elders that are in my tribe, they have explained to me over the years that they have had a lot of encounters. There's been a lot of encounters with the different tribes in the past, that a lot of different things were, encountered between the two, information passed along and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really an interesting sort of sideline of how much difference there would be between those who are kind of more, I guess you could say, in the mainstream civilization type thing, and those who are more of a Aboriginal or native kind of descent, that are still kind of more closer tied to their roots. How much of a difference is there between the interactions?
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a given to them. It's like it's no big deal. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, and we're at peace with it. And
just taken as a matter of course.
Yeah.
So out of the ones that you've talked to then, out of all the people that you've talked to, and aside from the ones in the book, do you have any that you have encountered that you would consider to be your favorite stories that you've heard?
Besides the one in the book?
Besides the ones in the book, yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's a favorite one, but I wanna get into this this summer if the lady and her daughter will grant me some more interviews. We started talking a month ago, and then she decided she didn't want to pursue it at the moment, but I'm hoping to re-talk to her again, because she told me, a very horrific story that happened to her, and I haven't got the whole thing yet, but basically what she told me is that she has never seen a gray, which is kind of strange. She's had many encounters, but there's never been a gray in any of her encounters, although she has seen and been involved with what we'd call the reptilians. And she says the reptilians are like the mantids. They are very a peaceful species, even though they look ferocious. But she says the most horrendous people she's had to deal with are the ones that basically look like humans. She calls them humanoids, but they're basically a species that look like humans, which makes sense because we're supposed to be the most violent species in the universe in any event. But she has several encounters and memories of being taken to what she calls a factory, horror factory, and a long conveyor line of animals, all kinds of pets, with humans like herself standing on these conveyor lines with knives and literally slaughtering the animals as they come down the line, with these humanoid creatures standing guard over them. And she has been made to kill animals that are alive at the time. And that is really a horrific sound for her, because she's a very animal lover, and when she thinks about it, she begins to cry because she's so emotional over it. But the worst part about it is that she has also been in the factory, and she says she hasn't taken part of it, but she has stood there and watched other humans on a conveyor belt doing the same thing to humans, coming down this conveyor belt. And it's a story that I want to see if I can learn more about. She's only told me a bits of it. She's one of these people that want to meet me face to face, but we happen to live about 300 miles apart. So I didn't want to travel during the winter with the snow and all that stuff. So I'm hoping this summer to find some halfway point where we can sit down and talk. But that certainly is a story that I've never heard before anywhere. So that would be one for the ages to tell people about. If she'll.
Yeah, absolutely. That one would definitely be an interesting one to have a read about. Definitely.
Yeah, because I've looked and checked the internet, and I haven't seen anything like that. So
yeah, I've encountered a lot of stories over the years myself, and I've never heard anything along those lines. I do have one other question for you as well. Yeah. This one will be from me, but I know that somebody in my chat room will have a deep affinity for this question. Have you encountered anybody that has talked about the, I guess, correlation between ETs and Bigfoot?
ETs and what?
And Bigfoot.
Oh, Bigfoot. No, not in the ones that I've seen. The closest that would come to it is shadow figures that they've seen, but they were more smaller people, so I haven't. We don't get many Bigfoot sightings in Ontario, so it's mostly out on the West Coast.
Yeah, I understand that one. Okay, well,
in fact, I don't think we've ever had a Bigfoot sighting in Ontario. I'd be surprised if we did.
I'd have to check into that. Yeah, I would have to check into that. I know there's a lot of them, especially when you get into the Pacific Northwest. But as far as in Canada, I'm not sure. So, well, where can people find your books?
The books are available on Amazon.com, and you can also connect to Amazon.com if you go to my website, which is BobMitchellWriter@WordPress.com. And all my books are on that site, but they connect to Amazon.com, but it's just easier to find them that way. And I think eventually you'll be able to probably order them through Barnes & Noble and other American outlets, but right now it's just Amazon.com. And in my personal email, you can call me anytime or send me an email at BobMitchellWriter@gmail.com.
That was BobMitchellWriter@gmail.com?
Yeah, all one word.
Okay. So you don't have a website that people can go to find you and everything like that, or?
Yeah, well, BobMitchellWriter@WordPress.com would be the website.
There you go. Okay, great. Well, you've got as long as you want here. What kind of final thoughts do you have that you'd like to get out to the people?
Final thoughts. Well, I guess the final thoughts is that you strike something that questionnaire Dina brought up, where she had some visions. Kelly had one strange vision when she was in that cube vehicle that I mentioned. She was taken in at night. It was early evening, but it was pitch black out. And the next thing she knows, that she's staring out the front window of this craft, and she's now in a desert setting, very barren and bleak-looking desert, but the sky doesn't quite look like the sky from Earth. And she sees a huge pyramid, and in the distance there is a line of which she assumes are humans, although she can't really tell from what they are. But this line of figures seems to go on and on and on into the distance as far as the eye can see, and they're all slowly, methodically marching through a door, and the humanoid that is in the craft with her says that's a portal, and all the human-like creatures seem to have white scarf cloths over their heads, and so she can't see their faces, but they're not resisting. They're just methodically going underground into this pyramid, and the humanoid says to her that they're going underground to escape something that's going to happen, and they'll never return again, and that it's a cataclysmic event that is going to happen. And Kelly is very worried about it, but then the creature, the humanoid tells her, don't worry, this has happened in the past. It's not happening now. So she doesn't know whether she's looking at something that's happened on Earth, or it's something that's happened somewhere else, but it's happened in the past. And he then tells her that a similar thing is going to happen on Earth. And he says that the Earth will begin to deteriorate around the year 2000. Now you got to remember, she's seeing this, and I believe it's in the 1960s when she's seeing this. So 40 years in the future, they're telling her the Earth is starting to deteriorate in the year 2000. Social structures will start to break down, economic structures, political structures, the weather and food will become a problem, water will become a problem, there'll be storms and ice storms, and everything that's really happened now is going to happen. And she's shown pictures of earthquakes and flooding and people fighting in the streets. And this being says it will get worse until the year 2050, and then there will be another event, and it will be a big event, and then after that, everything will start to be better again. There won't be total destruction, but the way things were will be no more, and people will be able to live a better life. So who knows? We're not quite there yet, but it's something to think about. And the more I thought about this pyramid thing, is there is always the theory that something like that happened on another planet, such as Mars, and that the Martians really escaped, and we are the Martians here on Earth. So who knows?
See, I've thought that many times over the years myself, that is a big possibility, that something happened there on Mars, the Martians left there, and we actually are the Martians that came here, and we're kind of like, the descendants of that group of people, basically.
Yeah. And if you look at some of the pictures that are coming back from Mars, there clearly seems to be pyramid structures there of some kind that have been eroded over the years to where they're not quite the same kind of pyramids we have on Earth, but there's certainly something that looks pointy or that could be pyramids. So who knows?
And you said that was the year 2050 was when she said that things would be
2050.
There. Okay, we were trying to make sure if it was 2015 or 2050.
No, I'm a little concerned if it was 2015, but all the things that predicted would happen, are happening right now. We got wars, we got floods, we got famine. Political structures are falling apart, so who knows?
Yeah, there is definitely something happening. I mean, I know a lot of people over the years, especially here recently, have been sort of having, I guess you could say, visions of the end, myself included, actually. I'm included in that group. And for mine, the way that mine kind of goes is that essentially the message to me was that this stuff is going to happen, but it's sort of like going through a birth canal. It's the travails of a birth, that once everything is done, yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, there's going to be a lot of chaos and all of that stuff that goes with it. But once everything is done, things do improve and get better.
Yeah. It's a strange vision.
It definitely is. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to get out?
Any other stories? Marianne had a vision that was equally as strange. Her vision is this happens actually. Her vision happened in the middle of 1990s, so it's a little closer. She's back home living with her adopted parents at the time. I think she got divorced, and she was sleeping in her childhood bedroom. And suddenly she wakes, she believes she wakes up. She doesn't think it was a dream. And she looks out the window, and her entire neighborhood is underwater. She lived in an area called Scarborough, Ontario, which is very close to Lake Ontario. So if there was a flood, a really big flood, your neighborhood could be underwater. But this was the kind of water you would see happened in New Orleans, where, the water was right up to the roofs and all that. And she remembers getting out of bed and then floating across the room into her closet and up through the attic door onto the roof, and then being taken into a spaceship floating in the air in a white beam of light, along with other people in her neighborhood. And they're in this spacecraft, and she thinks there could be 50 people in the spacecraft, all sitting around in circles, one circle after another. And as they look outside of the spaceship, they see walls of water destroying all the homes, and the buildings are collapsing, and this is supposed to be something that's going to happen in the future. And there are several graves that are on the ship. Now, I did some research about Lake Ontario, and while there is, every once in a while we get earthquakes here in the Toronto area, we don't get anything like you would see in Japan or in in Indonesia, where walls of tsunamis come barreling in from the lake and destroying homes. In fact, to have that, I think you have to have an area of water that's thousands of miles wide to have that kind of a wall. So this vision she had probably wouldn't occur in Toronto, but she used to live on the West Coast in Vancouver for about 16 years in her 30s and 40s, and there's always been a concern that a big tsunami was going to hit Vancouver at some point, so being on the Pacific Ocean. So who knows if her vision is of that in the future.
Well, to allude to that, or to add to that, I know there has been scientific information that's been released about there's basically glaciers that are up in the Arctic area, and some of the glaciation up there, what they've found is that in one particular glacier, and I cannot remember exactly where it is, I'm sorry offhand, but there's a glacier up there that has a huge body of water that's basically melted, that's sitting like on top of and inside of this glaciation that's up there. And what they're concerned about is that a portion of that glacier could shear apart, like through an earthquake or through melting process and all of that kind of stuff, and that basically this water that's in this glacier is so much water, so vast amount of water, that if it broke, basically it would come down like a tsunami. It would be quite deep, quite a high wave of water basically would come down from the north and wash from Canada all the way down south into the Gulf of Mexico area.
Well, if that happens, then we better get some boats together.
Learn to swim, exactly. Yes.
Learn to swim. Maybe one other thing before we go, if you got time.
Sure do. Yes.
I didn't tell you much about Pierre Mahar other than that little incident when he thought he saw the devil. But his real experience, the one that got him so upset when he heard me talk about coming through the walls. He's an adult now, and I guess he's in the band, but not in the band that became the more famous one. And he's working for a carpet as a carpet layer with a good friend of his. And they arrived back in the middle afternoon in his home in Brantford. And at the time, Pierre rented an apartment over a store of his friend's, of a building that his friend's father owned. And they were going to meet for beers later that night. So Pierre goes upstairs to have a little rest, and he puts the coffee pot on, he makes himself a cup of coffee, and at that time, he didn't have a couch. He sort of, I guess it was a one-bedroom place, but he had a bed against the wall, and he sat on the bed to watch TV. So he's just relaxing. He's got his cup of coffee with him on beside the bed there, and as he's sitting there watching TV, he starts feeling strange, that there's something not quite right, and that he gets this feeling that there's something in his apartment. And it's a really uneasy feeling, and almost to the point where he feels he's not alone. And he looks around, and he doesn't see anything, but he still feels kind of weird. So he gets up, and he goes out to the kitchen. He looks around and doesn't see anything, but this uneasy feeling gets worse and worse, and almost to the point where he's shaking, and he can't figure out what it is. So he goes back and lies on the mattress, and a few minutes later, this feeling of dread comes all over again, and to the point where he's now very, very scared, and he slowly turns his head to his left, and as he does, like it did when he was a little kid, the wall in his apartment suddenly opens up, and only this time it's a much bigger hole, and it looks again like rippling water. And as he's staring at this hole, suddenly this large foot comes out of the wall, and he watches, and he's actually paralyzed with fear, and then an arm comes out, and before he knows it, these two large, he describes them as humanoid, dark, big, 8-foot creatures with deep black piercing eyes start to come out through the wall towards him, and he is so scared that he just throws his coffee cup on the floor, runs out of the bedroom, runs down the stairs out to his apartment door and down the street, and he leaves all his furniture, everything he's got, to all his possessions, and never goes back in that apartment again. He has to get his friend to go back and get a set of clothing. And he had like nightmares of this all his life until he was able to talk about it with me. And I noticed that when he first started talking about this incident, he was shaking and reliving it. And when we put him under hypnosis, he got even scarier at this point. And but gradually, the more he talked about it with me in person, that fear went away, and he was able to just talk to me like you and I are talking now. But it had such an effect on it that he knew they were big and mean and menacing, and they meant him no good at all. They meant him harm, he felt, and he just took off and never looked back. And
wow.
it haunted him his whole life, basically.
Oh, it would me too. I guarantee that one.
Yeah, and it still haunts him today, but now he can deal with it, although he has no idea what it was.
That's really cool. I wonder...
He's never seen it again, so...
Well, I'd be grateful for that one myself.
yeah, and me too.
Well, Bob, do you have anything else that you'd like to get out? We've got about 5 minutes left if you want to take it, and if not, that's okay.
Well, I think the one thing is that, there's probably a lot of people who are listening to this broadcast today that have stories that they've been afraid to tell people all their lives. And the one thing I could say is that, it's time that they're no longer afraid, because they'd be surprised just how many people seem to have had encounters and are just willing to tell their story. And the more people come forth to tell their story, the less stigma it'll be, and they'll feel a lot better. Everybody who I talked in this book told me afterwards that an incredible burden was lifted off their shoulders. They felt lighter. They felt more at peace. They felt that they now didn't have to hide anymore. They could willingly talk about it, and they just felt different, like a different person. And they were all very grateful for me to listen to them. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't profess to be really an expert on what they've experienced. But I think I'm a good listener, and I think that's all they wanted. They wanted somebody that would sit with them for hours, as long as it took, and just let them talk and not judge them. And I didn't write this book to try to debunk their stories. I wrote it to let them tell their stories, and people can judge for themselves whether they believe them or not. But I can tell you that every one of them, they don't even care if anybody believes them, because they believe it happened to them, and that's all that matters to them, and they feel free about it now.
Yeah, they've gone from that position of believing a thing or having a faith in a thing to the position of knowing. So they know now that there is an extraterrestrial presence. There's no doubt in their mind whatsoever.
Yeah. And they also know that whatever it is, they don't have much control over it. That whatever has been encountering them, that they control the situation from start to finish, and no matter how much you fight it, you can't control anything. They have total control over you. And that leads Kelly to wonder, she's had many experiences. Even till today, she is not sure whether she's been allowed to see something, but she's not even sure if what she's felt or seen is actually what really has happened, or is what they've let her experience. Maybe it's something completely different, but this is what they've let her experience. Maybe it's more horrible than you think, and this is the only part that they've allowed her to remember.
Yeah, exactly, and how much of her mind has actually erased it as well because of a traumatic experience.
Yeah. And, as a little kid, she loved it. As an adult, not so much. But the other strange thing is that when she went into menopause, she had a visitation where they told her that this was the last time they would be ever visiting her again. They didn't need her anymore, which makes her believe that they had been taking eggs from her. And while she was relieved that she wouldn't have this experience anymore, and that was about 10, 15 years ago, even till this day, while she's relieved, she remains sad, because it's part of her life now, and she would like to have an experience again maybe with the Mantic, but she just feels a bit conflicted that she's glad it's over, but at the same time, she's kind of sad.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Well, listen, Bob, we have actually run out of time. You have been absolutely fascinating. I've really enjoyed the conversation tonight. I'm almost glad that Michael got sick. I'm almost glad that Michael got sick so I could have a chance to talk to you tonight. I know that's terrible to say.
Well, I hope Mike gets better.
Yeah, definitely. Just a stomach flu, basically, I think is what's going on with him. So nothing too major going on, but yeah.
Nothing serious. Okay, good.
Bob, thank you so much for being here tonight on Late Night in the Midlands. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and hopefully we'll talk again.
Absolutely. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye, Art.
Well, guys, that was Bob Mitchell. I hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation tonight, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my my first time doing all of this. And you know, when it comes down to it, whether or not you believe that people have had these experiences or not, they believe that they've had the experiences, and their experiences are not yours. And you cannot, I guess you cannot argue with somebody when they've had an experience, because that is what they know and understand as being the truth or their truth, or however you want to put it. So I know a lot of people out there, they hear about these experiences that people go through and that they've had over the years. And by the time that all is said and done, they try to talk to people about it. And there is this big stigma that's attached to it. And it really can be very horrible for a person to try to discuss these things. And I'm glad that, for instance, people like Bob Mitchell are out there gathering these stories together and trying to get the stories told, because they're very important. I think that they do relate back to the origins of our human existence here. We didn't get into that very much tonight, but that is kind of my own personal take on it. I think that they've been kind of with us all along. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed the conversation tonight. Thank you so much, you guys, for listening. This has been Late Night in the Midlands. My name is Ira Robinson, and as you heard, Michael is ill tonight, so he will be back with you shortly. If you want to catch my show airs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays here on the Late Night in the Midlands Network. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I talk about a lot of different topics, and I would definitely love to have you guys come and take a listen to that as well. In the meantime, if you would like, please go to latenightinthemidlands.com and become a subscriber or donate. This network is fully listener supported. We're kind of coming up short on this month, and if we don't get donations, we will not be here, and shows like this will not air. You're not going to hear the kind of stuff that you hear on this network elsewhere. This is a very unique place to be, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm very grateful that Michael Vera has let me become a part of this network as much as he has. And I would like to continue. I would like to stay here. So for my benefit, if nothing else, no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, you guys, please give us some donations. We would appreciate it. That's latenightinthemidlands.com. There's an area right there that you can hit the subscribe. And if subscriptions are not for you, if you don't want to do a monthly thing, that's fine. We totally understand. But at least a little donation would be very appreciated. If everybody that's out there that listens to this show gave even just a little bit, just even a couple of bucks, there'd be absolutely no problems. And we wouldn't have to be begging, So that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, guys, we are out of time. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Everybody out there, keep safe out there and have fun. And thank you again for listening. This has been Late Night in the Midlands on latenightinthemidlands.com.